All right, I think we can get started. Okay, good
Recording
evening,
in
everybody.
progress.
Calling to order the May 8th meeting of the Newton School Committee. Hello to everyone in the school committee chamber and to everyone joining us from home. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the school committee after we had a very lengthy budget process. This is our first meeting back at it since that time. So we've all enjoyed a bit of a lull, which has been, at least the school committee members, staff, we know you haven't. But we are glad to be back together again tonight, and we'll just dive right into our public comment. We have a few folks signed up. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the school committee and for the committee to hear directly for your concerns and perspective. We do not respond in this context, but we listen and seriously contemplate your feedback. And each of us is available by email or phone if you would like to schedule a conversation. So we have a few people signed up. Lisa, I've got 2 on my list. Is that correct? Okay, you'll have to feed me that name. I don't have the third. So when called, you'll be able to unmute, state your name and address, and take up to 3 minutes to share your concerns with the committee. Vice Chair Kathy Shields will give a 30-second verbal warning before time expires. And our first public commentor is Jessica Shin, followed by Brian Wagner, and then Patrick Song.
Hi, I'm Jessica Shin. I live at 336 Lake Avenue. I'd like to thank the school committee for restoring elementary school classroom sizes and elementary school strings and orchestra. We really feel like our voices were heard during your budget conversations. Tonight, I want to address the reduction of kindergarten aides in the school budget. I'm the parent of a rising kindergartner as well as a current 3rd grader at Mason Rice. It seems to me that the city of Newton will be breaking the contract it signed when Newton went to full-day kindergarten in 2019 and promised full-time kindergarten aides for each classroom. I fear the long-term ramifications of this short-sighted cut, all of the social emotional learning loss that our littlest children will suffer as a result of reduced support without a reduction in academic requirements for kindergarten, demoralized kindergarten teachers who decide to leave the district, and wonderful kindergarten aides who must leave the district, probably going to nearby cities and towns, many of which are still offering full-time aides in each classroom. If the NTA wins this legal battle and full-time aides must be reinstated in the middle of the year, so much loss will have already happened. I'm wondering if the district has a plan in place for the inevitable disruption that will occur in September with the reduction of support, plus the chaos that will come from needing to hire additional staff in the middle of the year if an arbitrator decides that aides must be reinstated. Mayor Fuller, please provide funding to reinstate full-time kindergarten aides for our children this fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have Brian Wainger. Apologies for.
Brian Wenger. I live at 256 Ward Street. I, like many other Newton parents, moved to Newton for the quality of the public schools and the commitment to their continued success and development. Unfortunately, the current administration has put the schools at risk in a disappointing and severely consequential position. I appreciate the efforts of the school committee and the city council to minimize the impact of the present situation. I realize that there are hard decisions. I'm here tonight to explain why I think the individual kindergarten aides are of critical importance and must not be compromised. When the transition was made to full-time kindergarten in 2018, Dr. Fleischman said, and I quote, "We will also maintain our commitment to small group instruction with a full-time teaching assistant in each kindergarten classroom to support both the teacher and students." The memorandum of agreement between Newton Public Schools and the Newton Teachers Association from December of 2019 says, and I quote, "Every kindergarten classroom with 14 or more students shall be assigned at least one full-time Category 1 kindergarten teaching assistant. This teaching assistant shall be distinct from, in addition to, any other special education aides that may be assigned to a particular students in the classroom." I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know who might win the relevant legal battle. But what I do know is a room full of 22 5-year-olds cannot be managed by a single teacher, even for a short period. A bad tantrum, a fall, or a bathroom accident requires the teacher's full-time attention. As a parent of 4 kids, I know this. Kids who have benefited from aides in kindergarten know this. Every kindergarten teacher knows this. How could a single teacher possibly complete planned curriculum in such an unsupported environment. Failing students in kindergarten will exacerbate educational gaps from the beginning. Those gaps will be hard to close. They will feed a vicious cycle of educational failures, particularly for students from more vulnerable families. I ask you tonight if this issue has been discussed sufficiently in committee, and have the consequences of such a decision been adequately explored and appreciated. Before embarking on such a decision, I would simply request that those supporting it spend some time among a sizable cohort of 5-year-olds. I'm sure that experience will help you appreciate the impossible predicament into which you are putting kindergarten teachers and the consequences to their students. Finally, I might direct you to a grassroots website explaining this position further, www.restorenewtonkaids.com. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have Patrick Song.
Hello, it's Patrick Song, 41 Janet Road. First, I want to thank the entire school committee and the interim superintendent for all the hard work that went through the budget. It is appreciated by me, the rest of the community. Before I get to the real subject of my remarks, I do want to add that this kindergarten aids issue is quite troubling, because when the mayor announced full day kindergarten with great fanfare, it was contracted with the teachers that they would each get one aide in each classroom. And I find it very troubling that we would contemplate put in a budget that we're breaching this contract or contemplate breaching this contract. So the subject of my remarks is one of the what's on the agenda tonight, which is this report on our AP program. If I come across as very passionate, it's because it's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. I entered college with 1 year's worth of AP credit. And thanks to that, my struggling immigrant parents saved an entire year's worth of tuition and room and board at a very expensive private university. This report is it's bad. It doesn't have any comparison to our peer districts. It cites pandemic. That's not an excuse. Some of these trends of our declining AP scores happened pre-pandemic. I'm particularly bothered by the concluding paragraph using the excuse that students aren't taking the test because the most prestigious colleges are not accepting AP credit. Well, I went and checked to the colleges I applied to when I was a high school student 30 years ago. And so that's the Ivies plus Stanford and MIT. All of them accept AP credit in some form. All of them accept it for credit. The only exception is Brown. They don't accept credit, but they do allow you to place into higher level classes, which is valuable too. And this, I'm glad that we're doing more access to more students. I think we should be about access for excellence. And, but I don't think this doesn't explain why the math score, the AP calculus scores went down so far down compared to other subjects. There are more plausible explanations, such as doing this mixed level math and the flight to private school, but none of those are even addressed in this report. So I just urge that we take another crack at this report and dig deeper and do some better analysis. I mean, if I was an AP, like a College Board AP grader, I would grade this report a 0 on a scale of 1 to 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who spoke. We appreciate hearing your perspective. Our public comment period is now closed, and we'll turn to our interim superintendent update.
Thank you, Tamika. And of course, I have to start with this being Teacher Appreciation Week, May 8th through 12th. I think a long time ago when I was a teacher, I remember it was one day. I'm not really sure when it has increased to a week, but I think that every day should be Teacher Appreciation Day. It is to certainly honor our teachers, not only in the Newton Public Schools, but certainly throughout our nation. They truly have lasting contributions that our children carry on, for years to come. And I know one thing I was thinking about was really taking time, because I will tell you, being out in the public and not necessarily in Newton, but when I'm home in Brockton, I will often have sometimes 50-year-olds come up to me and talk about what their experience was in the 4th grade classroom, the 5th grade classroom, my junior high experience with kids. And I'll tell you, it is some of the best gifts that I think you ever receive when you hear about, how you made them feel during that time and what they gained. So if you have a favorite teacher and you know how to reach out to them, I will tell you that's probably one of the best gifts. I want to thank also the PTOs. I was at the PTOC meeting last week, And it is just amazing what they do throughout your schools to honor your teachers, your staff, and truly a sense of community. And I want to thank them for what they do to honor our teachers and staff. And I started to look for quotes, and this is an unknown author. Somebody might know who this is, but I thought this was wonderful. And it says, teaching is one profession that really creates all other professions. So everybody kind of think about that for a minute. And I think we can all relate to that in some way or another. So I also want to talk about the calendar survey that we spoke about, I think, at our last meeting. I serve on this task force along with Anping Shen, Chris Bresky, parents, students, and I am really pleased that after quite a few meetings, we are at a point of finalizing a survey. It is right now in the process of being translated into the district languages. And the plan is to open the survey, I believe, next week from May 15th to the 26th for not only our families to complete the survey. We think it's going to take, Anping, I think you took it and said it's about 10 minutes,
We
10
talked
to
about that.
15. but
Yeah,
we're trying to.
well, I made some suggestion and I've been very grateful that it seems they're willing to consider. So
We're trying not to take up a lot of time. We want as many responses as possible. Our students at the secondary level will complete the survey in school. Also, our staff will have an opportunity to complete the survey. And I will tell you, I'm really excited about this. At one point, we were talking about some of the largest surveys or the percentages were during the pandemic. And you can imagine there were a lot of feelings during that time. A lot of people truly engaged in the process. We are trying to, again, get as many families to complete the survey as possible. So we have come up with some incentives, and I hope this excites you. First of all, I was so pleased. I don't know many people, again, in the community, but I had conversations recently with Susan Paley from the Village Bank. All I had to do was reach out. And they are going to the Village Bank, are going to support us with gift certificates. I think 25 of them at $20 each to a lot of your local businesses, which again, I thought was wonderful to keep it right here at home. You have some wonderful restaurants, ice cream shops, all kinds of places. But the biggest one, and thank you, Mayor Fuller, I'm very excited about this, is I was thinking, and again, I'm not sure if this is outdated, everybody, and I'm glad I just had a student come in. So I will tell you that I was thinking about what's something exciting that we could offer. And what we're going to be offering is a ride to school with yourself and maybe a few friends. And I think whether it's a kindergartner or an elementary youngster, I actually had a principal for a day in my office today, and she was very excited about the possibility of winning this raffle. And it is a ride to school on a fire engine. Not only that, but you also will get a tour of the fire station and everything that goes with that. When I called Chief Gentile, he was excited about, again, the engagement with the schools and the community and really showing that I know, you know, this is near and dear to my heart, firefighters. So I'm very excited that we are going to be able to do this. And Mayor, I understand this is kind of once in a so-called, I won't say lifetime, but I understand, and I really thank you. And I think our students will enjoy it. So I want to know, is this something you would be interested in, Helene? I love it. It's exactly what I wanted you to say to me. Thank you so much. I also will tell you that speaking of the mayor, I met with the mayor last Monday. We had a meeting with our legislative delegation from Newton. Tamika joined us. We have members of the mayor's team. Anybody else? We've been together so many times here. President Albright. President Susan Albright was there from the city
And
council.
Vice President Lipoff.
So again, I met in person for the first time, Senator Cynthia Cream, Representative Kay Khan, and Representative Ruth Balsar. We had engaging conversation. The House budget is already moved forward. We're into the Senate budget right now. There are some asks. I was able to send out some letters, even follow up to that meeting. So not only is it this advocacy in this budget, which is really critical at this time, we have talked at length about our OSD rate, 14% increase, but there are so many other things. And I would say to the mayor and the community is again, to continue to have these conversations early on continue to watch what's going through the legislature and just make sure, again, you are the biggest city in this metro area and certainly lead the way. And again, I want to end with, I know we have a very lengthy agenda this evening. Tomorrow evening, May 9th, we are doing our city council presentation on the FY24 budget to the city council. I believe we're starting there at 7 p.m. So again, I know there are virtual options, and we will obviously be there in person. I will be joined by Assistant Superintendent Liam Hurley, and we hope to be able to answer many questions. And one thing, and I've certainly had conversations, this was definitely a very challenging budget season. But again, there are many things that we are very appreciative of, not only our capital improvement projects, continued work that we're doing in the schools. We were able to make some changes to our budget, which truly are going to benefit our students for years to come. So I hope to be able to convey the challenges, the concerns, but also some of the very positive things that we continue to have in our budget. And that is my update.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Questions for Kathy about something she discussed in her update? I have a question, seeing no others. Partnership with the PTOs will probably be instrumental to getting the survey more look. So what is the thinking behind how to get folks the reminders and get the word out?
Yes, so thank you. So I met with our communications specialist today, Julie McDonough. I took the opportunity last Tuesday when I did meet with the PTOC. So we will be connecting with our CPEC, our LPAC, all of our stakeholders to make sure that we're continuing to get that message out. We do have a short, well, it gives us enough time, but our principals will be putting it in newsletters, reminding parents. And I really hope the opportunity for the raffle or some fun. And like I said, I understand people's time is valuable, but it helps us in making decisions as to reviewing our calendar. I don't think it's been reviewed in a while. Again, we have a lot of questions about holidays, cultural holidays. Obviously, the federal holidays are pretty much cemented in, but it gives us an opportunity to take a look.
Great, so wonderful. All right, thank you very much. So let's move on to our consent agenda. There are a few items for us to vote to approve. We've got a vote to approve a Cabot one-day PTO liquor license, a vote to approve the minutes from our November 17th caucus, our November 17th regular meeting, December 1st and December 5th regular meetings. And we are taking up out of order a vote to approve the official minutes for the April 10th and April 24th meetings for the MSBA process for Countryside. So does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Go ahead on Ping.
Okay.
On Ping moves, is there a second? Go there, thanks, Cove. So we've got a motion and a second. We'll take a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4? Yes. Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8? Yes. And Mayor Fuller?
Yes.
All right, the consent agenda is approved. And we can now continue on to our items for discussion and updates. And here, the first item is a goals update from our teaching and learning office on science and social studies. We have Renee McCall, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and she will be joined by Liz Butler Everett, K-8 Science, Technology, and Engineering Curriculum Coordinator, and Alan Ripp, History and Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator, K-8. Hi, everybody. Thank you for
Hi.
being here.
I just wanted to introduce Liz Butler
Of course.
Everett, who is our science coordinator, and we have Alan Ripp here, who is our social studies histories coordinator. And they will be providing an update on their specific content areas this evening, including goals and a look ahead to next year, as well as shifts in the curriculum. And we're going to start with Liz, followed by Alan, and then we'll open it up to questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Butler Everett. This is my second year in Newton, my second year in this position. So I'm very excited to speak to you tonight. I wish that I could, instead of speaking to you, hand you the materials that are in the students' hands in these pictures. It would be more entertaining for all of us, I'm sure. I'm going to give you an update on K-8 curriculum because that's my position. K-8, there are 2 high school department heads as well. First, before I talk about updates, I'm going to take you back a little ways in order to understand where we are right now. In 2013, the Next Generation Science Standards were released, and those were nationally developed science standards that were then adopted by about half the states across the country. Massachusetts in 2015 made the decision that they would mostly adopt the Next Generation Science Standards with some revisions. And so in 2016, the Massachusetts Science and Technology Engineering Framework was released, and that was the last update of standards in Massachusetts for science. In that framework, there was a shift in terms of how we do science in K-12 education. And the shift meant that instead of just learning sort of facts and layering facts on top of facts as we went and focusing really on science in isolation, the new science standards wove together science, the science practices, so how we do science, and engineering into one. So they layered the language of science practices, and engineering into one standard so that students weren't looking at those things in isolation. And the standards also focused on conceptual ideas instead of memorization of facts. And so when the standards were released, Newton had to revise a science scope and sequence for K-8, and also make those shifts in terms of their curriculum design and their pedagogy in the classroom. And so that is what began in the work before I came. And before I talk a little bit about the timeline, I'm going to highlight first the ways in which the framework shifts that happened in 2016 directly support the NPS goals of academic excellence and educational equity. And to do that, I'm going to highlight 3 different things that we're focusing on as we're thinking about new curriculum and pedagogical shifts. So the first you can see in the left picture is this idea of having all learning tied to complex science phenomena. So there is a maglev train. And in some pictures I'll show you later, the 3rd grade students across the district started a new unit this year where they're studying balanced and unbalanced forces. And at the beginning of this unit, they're introduced to this concept not by saying, hey, what do you know about forces? What do you know about balanced and unbalanced forces, as might traditionally happen in a classroom, not by going around and trying to pick things up with a magnet, but instead by this scenario where they watch a video where a mayor says, there's this new train that someone has proposed. And she says, will you help me decide whether or not this train is going to be safe for my city? And the students then, through learning about magnets and how they work, balanced and unbalanced forces, have to figure out whether or not this train is going to be safe for the city. And no one walking in 3rd grade across the city can explain how a maglev train works completely. And so by having these complex phenomena, not only are we rooting the ideas of science in trying to actually figure stuff out, but we're allowing everyone to walk in and grapple with this idea of like, what is this thing? I don't really know how this works. We can all figure this out together. The second thing here, it connects to that idea of conceptual science development with how we think about language in the classroom. So when we focus on conceptual science development, we also can think about what's the kind of language that we are supporting in the classroom, and what kind of linguistic biases can we examine by saying that students are allowed to explain their understanding of how things work around them, even without the academic language to do so, that they can use their everyday language, their own dialect, in order to describe how they see the world around them. And then we will purposefully introduce the language of science. And the final thing that we're focusing on, although there are many more connections, is this community connection. The picture up there is a unit that I'm currently working on, and that map is of vernal pools in Boston. And so the students look at vernal pools that are across Massachusetts and they zoom in to where's their school, where's their home community. Can they find vernal pools that they might pass on the bus on the way to school so that what they're studying in the classroom is not removed from their everyday experience? All right, so this is before my time, but in 2015, the science scope and sequence was revised starting at the middle school level in terms of K through 8. At the time that they began deciding on a new scope and sequence, there really was not curriculum that had been built to support this new science framework. And so the Newton Middle School teachers decided on the direction that they would go in terms of whether or not they would adopt Massachusetts standards in direct order, which they did choose. And then they developed their own curriculum in grades 6, 7, and 8. That happened between 2016 and 2019-ish. And just when we were shifting to elementary school and beginning to really codify what that looked like in middle school, the pandemic happened. And we learned a lot, actually. Science coordinators across the state and probably across the country learned a lot about how to deliver science information to teachers about science education, especially at the elementary level, because we were forced to do that in different ways over the pandemic. So some good things came of it. But there definitely was this halt from the pandemic, which I'm sure you'll hear from Alan as well. And then I came as a new coordinator. So you'll see there in 2021, 22, that's where I sort of decided to assess and plan after the pandemic. And we have been trying some new pilots across the city, both at the elementary and the middle school level. There are a few units that were chosen before I came that were purchased before I came sort of during pandemic time. And I've introduced a few of those, and I'll show you some pictures from those. So here are some pictures of pilots that happened around the city. The first is on the left-hand side. Grade 1 piloted Light and Sound, a unit by Amplify Science at Countryside and Bowen. And although the unit was interesting and it was good to establish for me those relationships with teachers so that we can continue to explore, we decided to not continue with that curriculum unit next year. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing instead. Grade 3, we've been piloting for 2 years, a unit that was set up before I came to pilot called Evolving Minds. And that's looking at traits and variation and evolution. And that one is being done at Pierce and also at Ward. And that's been very successful, and we will probably implement that next year. The one on the right was a pilot in 5th grade. How can we identify materials based on their properties, which is basically an introduction to chemical reactions. And that we haven't decided yet. I'm meeting with those teachers in June to try to make that decision about next year. There were some new units that were introduced in the elementary schools across the district. One was the one where the first picture in these slides were from. How can we stop soil from washing away? That was introduced across all 2nd grade classrooms, and that was very successful. You can see in that picture there, students are exploring erosion and using those watering cans and plant trays in order to develop different plans for how they can stop soil or stop sand in this case from washing away. And then the balancing forces unit that I talked about are those 2 other pictures. This is actually a video that's not playing, where students are exploring with magnets in order to answer that question about the maglev train. At middle school, as I said, the teachers developed units between 2016 and 2019. And one of the reasons that they did that is because there weren't many curricular products, high quality instructional materials that they could choose from at that time that supported the new frameworks. Since then, there have been a few curriculum products that have come out, including this one, Open SciEd, which we decided to pilot this year. Grade 6 went to a 4-day training over the summer with the BC Open SciEd Equitable Instruction Initiative. I also attended the training and it was fabulous. And the Brown 6th grade team piloted that unit this year. The rest of the Brown teachers, I'm hoping we will get NSF grant funding to go to the same training over the summer because the training was so effective, and implement that as the first unit in the 6th grade sequence next year. In 8th grade, teachers have piloted, or so actually in 8th grade, teachers are currently piloting a genetics unit. And I saw one of those lessons today. The genetics unit is looking at muscly cows as the phenomena. And we'll see how that goes as well. The idea is that teachers are getting experience with this Open SIED curriculum and deciding which of these units work well with our students, and which of these units which of the units that we've already developed do we want to try to revise following the patterns that we're seeing in this curriculum here. The middle school teachers have also been reading this book called Science in the City, Culturally Relevant STEM Education by Brian Brown. That is the book that I was referencing earlier that looks at linguistic racism in the classroom and the steps that teachers can take in order to support all students to develop science language in the classroom. Next week, thanks to an NSF grant, Brian Brown is running a workshop for all of the middle school science and engineering teachers across the district, talking about his book and giving us practical advice about how to take it from the book into the classroom. Next year, and this is in draft form at the moment still, there's a place still in the curriculum development that needs a lot of work, and that is K-2. Right now, there is still not a great solution for a high quality instructional material to be used in grades K-5. That same curriculum that we were trying in middle school is being field tested in Massachusetts. And so we've applied for a Department of Education grant to field test Open SIED in two schools at grades K1 and 2 at both of those schools. My plan right now is to also run pilots of a product that we're using in 3 through 5 right now to compare those two pilots. In grade 3, as I said, there's this Evolving Minds curriculum that we've been piloting for 2 years. And then we have this locally sourced NPS climate and life cycles unit that works with wood frogs that I go out and collect in vernal pools, and the teachers raise in the classrooms. And we've worked with grassroots wildlife and developed that unit over multiple years. In grades 6 through 8, as I said, I'm hoping that the 6th grade teachers can all go to that 4-day training, and that the 8th grade teachers can review the genetics unit that they piloted at the very end of this year and perhaps work on piloting something else along with the 7th grade teachers as well. And then and expand that to also include supporting EL students in the classroom.
I'm wondering if it might make sense for us to pause there and have questions specific to your presentation before going on. Okay, all right. Cove, do you have?
I do.
Okay.
No, it's really interesting. I'm excited to see the Open SIED materials on there. I'm quite familiar with them, and I think it's a really great project and a way to bring it to the classroom. I was wondering a couple things. Do you have a core text? Is there a core text for the middle school science at this point or not?
There is not, no.
Yeah. And I understand that. It was hard to align with the texts that were out there. And so what will happen if you're not able to train those additional teachers?
With the Open SIED? I think that most likely, my aim is to get training. And we actually, sorry, I left out part of this. We did do some training for the Open SIED pilots that happened this year. That training happened within the constraints that we have here, which is, getting subs for a day. And so they did do 1.5 days of training with the Open SIED national organization. The organization that is run out of BC, I thought was particularly effective. And the 4-day training, the Brown teachers reported, made the biggest difference in terms of their unit implementation in the fall. That's what I would like to get all of the teachers. That is also quite costly and requires a 4-day commitment, either in the summer or in September, which is hard to do with subs. And so if at all possible, I would like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers to experience that 4-day training. And if that's not possible, then I would like to bring in more of the national organization on a shorter timescale in order to get teachers more familiarity with the units, try out more of the units and see whether we want to adopt further. I'm also applying for a Department of Education implementation grant. And that would potentially give us more funding too.
And so otherwise, the teachers at the middle school level are creating these units, but across the district.
They have created the units. They're sort of revising and iterating on the units at this point.
And I was just also going to just kind of ask, and I know this is like this can be a little bit of a difficult question to answer, I suppose,
Okay.
but the balance in the elementary schools now of how much science do you think they get? Versus, I know, like, there's often a focus on literacy and math. Science sometimes falls. I think when my kids were in that place, it was like you did half social studies, half science. What's it like now?
I think that all science coordinators would tell you that they wish there was more time on science. The next generation science standards suggest that there's far more time to be spent on science than any elementary school has time in their schedule to be spent on science. I think that there is one of the things that I've thought about over the pandemic in particular, but in thinking about having, this new slate here, is that the clearer we can make the curriculum for teachers, the more we can make sure that in a teacher's very busy schedule at the elementary level, that we can have something for them to work from and sort of succinctly move through. It's something that's really good. They're going to use that time for science. And so when I've given teachers new units, when I've revised that amphibians unit, which will become the life cycles and climate unit, they are eager for that stuff. They want to do that stuff. If it's done well, they want to make the time in their day to have students be sort of putting sand in a planter and then pouring water over it. And you'd think they might not want to do that, but because it's messy, but they want to do those things in the classroom. And I just have to make sure that the curriculum that I'm handing off to them is both accessible for the teacher and really interesting for the students. And then they make the time that they need, basically. And it's never enough is the second part.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Cove. Others? Go ahead, Rajiv, then Chris. Oh,
So thank you. This was helpful. It's nice to hear about the experiential approach. And my question is, how do we think about assessing the success of the units? Because you have some fascinating pilots going on.
Yep.
Is it a combination of what the students think, what the teachers think? Do you ever talk to the high school teachers and hear how well prepared they think middle schoolers are for sciences at the high school level once they get to that point? So would just love to hear a little more.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of asking for teacher feedback, for teachers asking for student feedback, for using the assessments that are built into these curricular units. By eventually looking at MCAS data, obviously I have only MCAS in 5th grade and 8th grade, so it's a little more difficult to use that as an assessment. And then I also would like to deepen my relationship with the high school department heads in order to get more information about the preparation of 8th graders going into 9th grade. It's a combination of all of those things that I'm using to assess the units.
thank you, Rajiv. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I just wanted to make sure I understood the language development piece of it. You started out, with referring to this as kids being able to, explain scientific phenomena in kind of common everyday language, and then you layer in the actual sort of scientific language. And then you went on to talk about this text that teachers are reading, Science in the City, and you're referring to that as addressing linguistic racism. So can you just draw the line between those for me? Or are we talking about two totally separate things?
No, I think we're talking about the same thing. When we support students' language development, all students' language development in science, by first focusing on a conceptual understanding and then very explicitly drawing the line and describing what is this science word that we're all going to use right now. We're both increasing access for everyone in the classroom and not allowing linguistic patterns that have historically only served some students in the classroom to be the ones that continue. So if a student walks into a classroom and is able to use that terminology, most likely they are not using it with the depth of understanding that they should have at that point. And there's lots of research to say that if we increase students' conceptual understanding before we layer on the technical language, students are going to be more likely to understand what that technical language is. But also by doing so, we're saying that all of our ideas, all of our ability to use language, the different language that we come into the classroom with, the dialect that we're using, all of those things are valued in the classroom. And then we're going to use this very specific word in order to describe this thing that we have collectively established as a concept in the classroom. Does that make sense?
I'm like mostly following, but I guess this is kind of where this came from. As I was thinking about it and thinking about, my third grader coming into the classroom, like he doesn't have any scientific language at all. I presume almost all the third graders in the classroom don't have scientific language or, and so I guess I was just curious, like, does the research say that really falls along like racial lines of early development of scientific language? I guess I'm just still a little confused by that point because, when we're talking about scientific language, we're talking about sort of these very objective things.
Yeah, I think that both of those things are true. So we privilege a white discourse in classrooms. Most teachers across the classroom are white and not most students across the classroom are white. And we privilege a white discourse in the classrooms. And at the same time, not everyone comes in with the same language or science language at their fingertips, right? So that means maybe your student comes in and doesn't know that science terminology. And for everyone, being able to understand that conceptual background is positive in terms of them being able to understand that science terminology as well.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead, Anping.
Thank you. Well, I think currently we can say the science is increasingly important in student curriculum schools framework. Probably we can say this all the time, but this is a really interesting time. So 2015, you said nationally, they had a new framework. And then our state 2016 adopted, not everything, but most of the framework. And I'm a little bit curious, any kind of difference which could be meaningful. And also I'm thinking about, you mentioned that because you embrace this pedagogical shift. So because the content, I assume, or the sequence of content changed. So the pedagogically speaking, we have to make shift. And so share with us any challenges you have seen for the professional development in terms of content, sequence, or the pedagogically speaking, there's some challenge, or even financially, because we have to buy new books. Just let us know what kind of things we can be supportive.
So first of all, there wasn't a substantial shift between the next generation science standards and the Massachusetts science standards. Not enough for me to get into the weeds here about what those differences were. I think the thing that's been the biggest challenge in terms of making the shift, the pedagogical shift, and the curricular shift as well, is that I talked about having complex science phenomena, finding just the right thing to anchor a unit with. So whether it's that MagLab train or in the 6th grade light and matter unit, it's looking at a two-way mirror and finding just the right complex phenomena to start each unit with and have all of the standards tie back to that one thing is very difficult. And so asking teachers to, for the example of in the middle school curriculum, to find that complex phenomena, and then to, once they find it, be able to develop that storyline through all of those standards, and find that maybe that isn't the right phenomena, right? And they're constructing all of those lessons. It's an incredibly daunting task to do. And that's one of the things the middle school teachers told me when I started here, was that they wanted to figure out better phenomena for their units, which is very hard to do. One of the reasons that adopting something like Open SIED is useful is that those phenomena have already been developed by people for whom it's their full-time job to develop those phenomena. They've already been field tested and tweaked, and in Massachusetts schools and around the country. And so they're able to use that phenomena and those lessons in order to then move through that unit, but also sort of develop and iterate on that unit that's already been built for them. I think that some of the pedagogical shifts that go along with that is also difficult unless you have that curriculum foundation as well. So if it's difficult to make that unit, and you don't have a sort of solid foundation of that unit with that strong, complex phenomena, it's difficult to figure out what are the pedagogical shifts that I'm making. So I talked to an 8th grade teacher at Bigelow the other day about the first 3 lessons. And she said, you know, I really think I'm facilitating dialogue here. And I said, and that's with the new unit that she's piloting. And that is great. Just that idea that unit is allowing her to feel more successful as a facilitator in the classroom of the dialogue as students are trying to figure out the science concepts is one of the reasons we might lean towards that, and also towards getting lots of professional development in order to implement some of those units.
Just very quickly, a follow-up question. Came from China. I was so surprised, even at the same school, same level, same subject, teacher could use different materials. It's unthinkable in China because nationally we have one textbook and teachers' reference book, all designed nationally, and you have to teach the same textbook and same sequence, same time, but here a lot of leeway. So I'm wondering if teachers still kind of having some leeway to teach their own, using own materials, since we don't have so-called official.
Yeah, and I taught in England for a few years too, which has a much more centralized system as well. So I understand that. I think there's both happen here. Elementary school teachers, because of some of the constraints that they have, are generalists and happy to take a good curriculum and implement that. Although some may also want to iterate on that unit that you give them. In middle school and high school, where you don't have generalists anymore, you have specialists in the classroom, there's more flexibility in Newton, although we have talked a lot over the last few years at the middle school level, last year at the middle school level, about what does that mean about equity across the city, and how can we continue to develop curriculum in a way that is both equitable in terms of what we're teaching, but also in terms of the materials that we are providing to students at each grade level.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ping. Go ahead, Kathy. Then I've got a quick one.
So I had a sort of a follow-up question to what Rajiv was asking. It sort of ties back to, you were talking about there were 3 elementary school pilots, and you distinguished between a unit that we were not continuing versus one that had been very successful that you are continuing. And I don't, without delving into the details of those units, I was just wondering if you could talk more generally about what makes a pilot successful versus unsuccessful, and how you make that decision about whether to continue a pilot or not.
Yeah, there are a number of different things that might lead to that. But for example, in that first grade pilot, the constraints, that unit ended up being just much too long for the time that we had in the classroom, the time any elementary first grade classroom would have, not unique to Newton Public Schools. Students seemed to be walking away with strong language development, but they were not consistently excited to do the science in the classroom, right? And so it was this push and pull between when I went into the classroom, there was a lot of reiteration and the lessons seemed to be going too long each time. And students seemed to kind of understand the classrooms, but they did not want to do science. And that is not what I want to choose as a unit when I'm trying to figure out what the next unit is for light and sound. That's a sort of simplified version of that. I both want to be able to see students' language development and conceptual understanding is strong, and that they're sort of excited to do it, to get to science class. The last thing I want is for students to not be excited in first grade when they're going to a light and sound unit. And what's interesting is that this was the same curriculum product for the first grade as the third grade, but the third grade was much more developmentally appropriate in my estimation, in the teacher's estimation, the forces unit. So I did see that strong conceptual and language development with students in the classroom, and they were excited to be working with the materials, and the teachers didn't feel like it sort of dragged on. It didn't feel like empty time to them.
It's really helpful.
Yeah,
thank you.
that's sort of a qualitative answer in part, but that is important.
Emily, Emily, and then I'll ask my quick
about.
I was hoping we could get moving on to Alan's question.
Oh, I'll be super quick.
Go ahead, Emily.
No, it's fine. I'll be super quick.
He told me to go long.
So
Emily.
I just want to say a couple things. First and foremost, I am so excited by how excited you are about the curriculum that you are developing, which seems to be constantly being evaluated and changed and updated and improved. And so for that, thank you. I'm slightly troubled by the fact that, fingers crossed that you get a Newton Schools Foundation grant to continue the professional development that needs to happen for the rest of 6 to 8. I don't have any answers to that, but I think it would be a shame if we were not able to continue and move forward with that programming. So that's really not really a question. It was just more of a comment. And shout out to Helen Gerland, who was my first grade science teacher, who taught me about the meniscus, which I think, which served me well while studying chemistry in college. And every single time I bake something, I think of her. So
great.
So important. I'm so happy with what you're working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Wonderful segue into teacher, or way to tie in the teacher appreciation piece too. So Liz, my question for you was along the same lines as Chris's question, and asking you to kind of delve into this concept of linguistic racism and linguistic bias a little bit more. I understood kind of implicitly what it meant and where it stems from, but I knew that there might be folks out there who are struggling to see the link, the intersectionality between this, very discrete, very cut and dry scientific subject matter and how bias might manifest into that. So could you talk a little bit about that? And I'm trying to move us along, but I really wanted to kind of just understand that a little bit better.
Sure. So one of the examples that is given in the book is that, and I could give a few different examples, but let me stick actually with an example from our curriculum instead of one from the book, although they're sort of similar. If a student in third grade comes in and begins to work with magnets, and we're talking about this idea of balanced and unbalanced forces, right? That language that I've just used with you of balanced and unbalanced forces is not one that we use really in everyday language. And yet we know what those things are because we move things around all the time, right? We don't necessarily know that exactly what those things are. Even my third grade teachers might not know that everything about balanced and unbalanced forces, why professional development is very important. But we know what that things don't move unless we give them a force, and we might not know that has to be an unbalanced force to cause things to move. But students know that too. Third graders know that too. And once they start to play with materials in the classroom, they can use their language of, if I push more on this side than I do on this side, then it moves this way. Or if I pull more over here, then I'm pulling over here, then it moves this way. Or if they're using magnets, they can describe that without layering on this idea of balanced and unbalanced forces. The Boston Science Museum playground in the park does use that language, right? And so if you're walking around there with students, they talk about balanced and unbalanced forces. It's possible someone brings up that idea early on in third grade, right? Someone says like, well, the forces are unbalanced. And I'm telling you, even my third grade teachers don't necessarily understand all the implications of what balanced and unbalanced forces means. And so does that student know necessarily what that language is that they're bringing in that they think might fit this scenario? No. But is their understanding their understanding is not any more valid than a student who's not trying to layer on that kind of terminology early on, right? Those students who are trying to explain things in their own words are really able to show understanding of how that maglev train might start or stop, even if they're not using that vocabulary. But again, as I said, at some point we say, all right, everyone in the classroom now is going to use this language of balanced forces and unbalanced forces. And because we have drawn this line here, it's very clear that we all have access to this language, and we've talked about it, and that's the language we're gonna refer to. If someone says like, it's not matched, oh, do you mean unbalanced? That word that we talked about there, and that we introduce that purposefully as we go. I don't know if that example helped to highlight anything.
A bit, but would it be fair to characterize it as the professional development piece that seeks to value and or appreciate the nuanced ways that all peoples might explore a concept?
Yes, that all students, regardless of their language development, the language that they're using or the dialect that they're bringing into the classroom, are able to understand and explain science concepts, that the language that they're using does not preclude their conceptual understanding. I'm not sure if I even use that, but
I think I got it. I think, yeah, you've done a really good job of articulating that. I'm sure we could probably explore even more.
Yes.
But I would love to thank you very much, Liz. I'd love to turn now to Alan Ripp with the History and Social Studies curriculum piece. Thank you.
I have to tell you, this last conversation fascinates me. As a fourth and fifth grade teacher in Newton for many years, a long time ago, those experiences of kids coming with really strong language and seen as the smart kids right away really affected how I was able to kind of reach other kids. It would shut kids down, which is fascinating. Sorry, I am following Liz. I don't have pretty pictures. I went very pragmatic. I apologize. I'm Alan Ripp. I'm the curriculum coordinator of kindergarten through 8th grade. Because of the budget cut, I'm also providing literacy intervention to kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade at Horace Mann. If you need a comedy break, come see me teach kindergarten, sitting on a chair slightly smaller than my shoe. And I've slowly gotten used to that. So I was here 5 years ago on the eve of, how did you advance that? So we have to actually push it, great. Oh, what? Did it work? Oh, can I pull this? Okay. Oh, the advanced one, okay. Thank you. Oh, right there. So I created department goals at that time. Again, this was on the eve of the new framework, to develop units that did due diligence to the new framework and really highlight those voices that have not been heard in our old curriculum, and really encourage kids to be more active and to be thinking about themselves as global citizens. Additionally, I know that coming to this work, access to history and social studies really has a lot to do with literacy, and really need to think about literacy and kids' access to be successful in this department. when the new framework came out, can he do it? He can do it. It was better than I feared and not as good as I hoped. But the thing that I liked the best, and that goes from K to 12, are the standards of practice, which I really appreciate. Those 7 standards are for all kids. So it's demonstrating civic knowledge, which is now embedded throughout all the grades. We used to have a standalone civics outline for elementary. Now those civics are more in the framework as we roll that out. More about inquiry, kids researching and having those ideas, not dissimilar to what Liz was talking about with science. The organization of information and really thinking about primary and secondary sources, which we've gotten away from so much in the past in history and social studies. Kids being able to analyze sources. And now that we are, we have sources everywhere and kids are being bombarded with information, how can they start to analyze that? How can they really think of what is opinion, what is fact, and evaluate the credibility and accuracy of information and disinformation and misinformation? Argue and explain conclusions and really use good reasoning. And then my favorite probably is the 7th, because in the past, teaching history and social studies, sometimes it just feels so stagnant. So getting kids really to think about what action could I take? Do I have questions? Do I think I can be active in making a difference in who we are? So then we all know what happened. So that year the framework was adopted and we began work mainly in middle school. Give you a nutshell of the framework. 8th grade went from history to civics, and then 8th grade was kind of shoved down. More history from 8th grade went into 5th grade. A lot of the 5th grade history went into 4th into 3rd. Those are the big changes. The Department of Ed offered a lot of resources right away for civics. So we were able to get civics up and running because we had also been piloting and using a Generation Citizen Action Civics that we were rolling out through the middle school. So we had a foot up, we were in a good place. And meeting with the Department of Ed and school districts around the state, felt really good about where we were at that time. 6th and 7th were big moves, big changes. We had not been teaching anything around in India or Asia, which is egregious, particularly if we look at our demographics. So we started working on a crosswalk for 6th and 7th. And in the school year 1920, started looking at 5th and 4th grade, and then we shut down. So for the next year, which was horrible and also very eye-opening, I spent all my time working with middle school to pair to like really what is essential here? What do we want all the kids to know district-wide? And then from kindergarten to 6th grade, the 5th grade, those 6 years, pushing out units of study that I developed that could be done hybrid or virtual. I tried to do it 2 weeks before it came out so that teachers, special educators, language support teachers had a chance to look at it. What it forced me to do was look at in-depth every unit we taught from kindergarten through 6th grade and through 5th grade, and see what was missing and see how dated and how it kind of excited me in the fact that I now had the time, because I had to really look at in depth. So it kind of lit a fire under me what could be better. In 2020, 21, we basically, that was the year. Luckily, the Department of Ed was moving forward with some pilot work, and the DESE pilots in 5th grade and 7th grade that we're a part of now were created by Primary Source, which we have a good relationship out of Watertown, and the PD was provided by Edutopia. I wrote a grant trying to get us a part of that pilot. We that first year only got 7th grade and only 2 teachers at 1 middle school. Last year, I was able to get a 2nd year and 5th grade, which was really good, and write a grant that not only gave a stipend to all the teachers who are participating, but also is reimbursing Newton for our substitute costs for PD time for those teachers. So that was really good. And then started a pilot for 3rd grade that we created in-house. So I created with teachers, 3rd grade teachers across the district. Currently, progress this year is very slow due to impact bargaining again, because my job has been reduced. So the plan, mainly my work this year has been really thinking about how do we take the pilot work going on now and move forward with that. So that's kind of what the last 5 years look like. As we look at this year, middle school wise, we changed from Generation Citizen Action Civics to iCivics, which we, as a group of the teachers, really appreciated a little more. It's pitched a little more toward middle school, a little less toward high school, which is the original development of Generation Citizen. We also noticed there was a really need for more Holocaust education. So we created a short lesson on the Holocaust, tying it to civics, the fragility of democracy, red flags, that piece of it. So it fits nicely in the curriculum and mirrors a lot of current events. So it was important, I think, for it to live there. In 7th grade, we are finishing the 2nd year at Bigelow. Not only did the 2 teachers at Bigelow do an amazing job, they've become fellows for the state, which has been great. So now I'm using them as my PD, and starting next week, no, I'm sorry, starting Thursday, starting this week, they'll start working with the other 7th grade teachers and rolling out that information that they have been teaching over the last 2 years. The best thing about the DESE pilot in my mind is that they really wanted teachers to give feedback. And Chris and Sherry, if you know Chris LeBranche and Sherry Rice at Bigelow, they were the right people to do this. They have affected so much change within this pilot and given so much feedback. And now we're training, again, teachers across the state, which is really exciting. And then in 6th grade, we've kept the United Nations Global Gold projects because that's been such a wonderful activity for the students. Again, that inquiry based, that research, and being able to show their work. And we've been doing in-house units in 6th grade and ready to roll that out for next year. So middle school is in a pretty good place at the moment. When I look currently at our elementary, our 5th grade pilot, we have 9 teachers in 5 schools that will be finishing up the DESE pilot. I'll meet with them week after next, and we'll start creating a plan of what will this look like? How do we roll this out across the district? And same thing with 3rd grade. I have 21 teachers at 8 schools that are doing our in-house pilot. And I'll be meeting with them on the 25th of this month to do the same thing, to get feedback, what worked, what didn't, what's missing, what really was exciting, and how do we move forward with that. Again, impact bargaining took me out of 4th, 2nd, 1st, and kindergarten work. So that's just been on hold. I can't tell you how excited I am next year to pick that back up because the need is clearly there. So looking forward, with the middle schools, because we're pretty much ready to roll out curriculum as we've designed, we really want to keep visiting the scope and sequence, make sure it's working. Again, look across the district, use our district-wide PD time and collaboration time to look at that. We need to renew the focus on literacy skills. The pilot for 7th grade has amazing literacy skills built in. I need to go back to 7th and 8th and pick that back up. That's really important. There's also an 8th grade MCAS, civics MCAS that's being piloted by the Department of Ed this spring. I cannot find any information, and when I ask questions when they expect to make it Commonwealth-wide, but at this point it's being piloted. Go to the website, take the test, the mock test. I did pretty well. I didn't get all. I blame the question, one of the questions for one of my misses. The other, was my ignorance. So it's fascinating to see what they're asking and the depth in which they're doing it. Again, the 5th for grade 3 and 5, how do we roll out those pilots? Ready to jump back in with 4th and 2nd. I have a pretty good plan with 4th grade because I was able to meet with those teachers before the pandemic. So we're doing the 4th grade, which I'm very excited about. We're doing the regions and we're making it, we're going region by region instead of going unit by unit. So within a region, we'll talk about in depth the native people, we'll talk in depth about European explorers, we'll talk in depth about Western expansion, and then the states and economy and those pieces of it, and integrating some civil rights history. Civil rights is moved basically from 4th to 5th, but our 4th grade teachers have done a great job with civil rights. So I'm going to embed some of that history in each of those units as we go around the regions of the US. And then I'm hoping by the end of next year to meet with kindergarten K teachers so we as a group can get our eyes on the new frameworks and start planning for that. As we move forward overall, so as a department, the things that I'm really focusing on is to continue our work in culturally responsive instruction. It's been piecemeal based on what the last 5 years have looked like, but the middle schools have renewed their commitment to that. And I think there's a lot that can happen now. Revisit the civics goals. I'm pretty sure they're all embedded, but I really want teachers to be on board that they feel confident with those civic pieces that are in the framework. Look for and build better cross curriculum opportunities. We know there are in science, we know there are in ELA and math. So now that we have a new framework and we have a new curriculum, we can start looking it also buys us more time. If we can work science and social studies at the same time, it's you know, two birds in one hand with one stone. Bushes, stones, and birds. Getting 2 birds with 1 stone. That's very violent. I'm sorry. Go back again to the literacy skills. History and social studies is really about literacy, how we access these stories, how we access history, and how we then share what we know, and then just have more fun. Good student-centered inquiry projects. When I taught 4th grade, we had the dam project, and the kids love saying, "Can we get to work on the dam project right now?" Where kids really got to, you know, ask questions and inhabit their roles and think about what does it mean to build a large dam and control water, and who benefits and who doesn't. So that is it. How fast was that?
It was wonderful. And you're speaking my language, having fun while doing your work. I love that. Appreciate that.
I call it academic laughing, which I see now and then. Like kids are laughing, but they're on task and they're learning something.
Absolutely. Paul, I see your hands. I'm imagining others as well.
Thank you, Alan. That was great. 2 questions, one specific, one general. Just curious, do you cover in any of these units the Japanese internment during World War II?
You know, we used to do it in 4th grade as part of the region. It's done more in high school now, but that's one of the history pieces I want to make sure that we embed when we do the West.
Yeah.
So that will still exist.
Yeah. I happen to be reading a biography of J. Edgar Hoover right now, who actually opposed it.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially the idea of US citizens being put in internment camps.
I have to tell you, one of the worst experiences as a 4th grade teacher at Cabot was we went to an arts and sciences presentation. It was a play designed. It's the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
And at the very end, they say, and I didn't know this was coming, they asked the students, "What do you feel? You vote." And one of my students stood up in favor of internment, and I couldn't save him. And I felt horrible. And I thought, where is he going to be 10 years from now when he looks back and go, "Yeah," and I stood up and said, "Yeah, please put US citizens." So I still want that to live there.
The general question is, with the somewhat pervasive access to ChatGPT and other AI kinds of tools, do we have a policy with regard to students using those tools to write their essays and reports?
We're working on that right now. ChatGPT, if I'm right, is not allowed to be used by anyone 18. Is there own rules? Okay.
Yeah, well,
we as a district are having that conversation, and Stephen is leading that work. You want to speak to that?
In progress. I mean, I think part of what we're looking at is what are the as with any tool.
Great.
Oh, wow. You did want to see just temporarily. Last time I came up here, I kneeled.
I think with any tool, I think with ChatGPT, we already have seen it change some people's workplaces dramatically in terms of what it can provide and what it can do. And I think part of what we have to do is look at how how we teach our kids to use it responsibly, because I don't think it's going away. And so what are the uses for it? How can we use it? What's responsible use of it? And so that's what we're working on. We've had some good conversations with curriculum leaders across the district, and we need to continue those. And that's where we are. I mean, I think it would be foolish to think that kids aren't using it, even if they're not supposed to be using it, because we know that they use things that they're not supposed to be using based on the terms of service agreement. So what does that mean, and what are the implications in the classroom? There are not very good tools right now for identifying who's using it. There are things we can do that have been somewhat effective. Like if you use Google Docs for an essay, you can see a revision history in Google Doc and see if a large amount of text was pasted in. And that gives you a little bit of suspicion, if you were suspicious already, that it may be done with a program that it wasn't supposed to. But there are also advantages. There are ways that you can use ChatGPT to help students start an essay, to get ideas for something and then build upon that. And so how do we do that? And I think that's how people are going to end up using it in the workplace as well. How do we help kids use that effectively in that way and make it their own? They still have to produce their own work.
Thank you.
We have asked teachers to explore a little bit, just to get used to it, see how it could be useful, and then start thinking about how do we know the quality of the work and where it's going.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tamika.
Thanks, Paul. Others? Kathy, I saw you, and then Anping.
So I had sort of one comment and then more a clarification. I think that as a parent of a seventh grader at Bigelow who has been a part of that curriculum pilot, I am remarkably impressed by the scope and the range of topics in that world history class. And it is so much better, I would say, than the version of world history that I learned as a student, particularly at that age. And I am just so pleased to see the range of what's included in that class. So kudos to the Bigelow teachers there. And then the clarification I wanted just to make sure that everybody understood some of the context when you're talking about impact bargaining. Just to clarify that for those of you who don't know, as part of not this just past budget cuts, but a year ago's budget cuts, we reduced the full-time nature of all of our curriculum coordinators and asked almost all, and asked all of you to take on additional responsibilities. And so I just wanted to clarify that when you talk about impact bargaining, that means how that reduction was implemented in your particular case, and other curriculum coordinators probably had similar experiences.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Anping, go ahead. Others?
Thank you. Well, history and civic studies certainly very exciting, and a lot of things going on. So teacher can use county events and make students very interested in this topic. Now, I'm glad that Paul mentioned the Japanese internment in Second World War, and that was very significant event and very sad part of history. And in Asian communities, use this example again. But unfortunately, sometimes students do not learn that history well. And past few years, I worked with some Massachusetts Asian organization, try to push to see if a state would willing to pass some bill to include more Asian history and culture in the school curriculum. And I thought this is critically important, especially at this time. And of course, this is probably beyond your level, but still I want to emphasize that. And another important historic event is the railway workers. Most of the Chinese laborers came here 150 years ago. And when the railway was built, okay, you guys done, kick them out. If you do not leave, we kill you. So that part, of course, I can talk more. But
that will stay alive as well in fourth grade, because we talk about expansion. There wouldn't have been expansion in the West like that without.
Especially those people who paid half the salary, the worst working condition, the worst place. Those Chinese laborers built a Great Wall. They can't do anything. Send them, and then never make trouble. And that's my daughter at Newton North when she was deciding the honor history, the thesis, and she was struggling between the Chinese laborers or the Cuban Missile crisis. And she asked me, I was smart enough not to say anything more because I knew if I say something, she would do the opposite. And I said, talk to your teacher, and teacher encouraged her to do the.
So I'm thinking one of the things I run into a lot, and I'm really talking to teachers, there are holes in our history. And there's holes for a reason. A lot of kids ask when we do civil rights, well, what about the Chinese people in America at that time? There's not a lot of history there written because they were so underrepresented. They were so controlled by our laws that even when we don't have primary sources that we want, we have to teach why that hole is there. We have to teach kids that when we see history, there are voices missing. And it's not because it didn't happen, but it's because history is changed by power and wealth and control.
That's very
so I want
well
kids
said.
to know. A lot of times teachers say, well, I couldn't find any primary sources, so I didn't teach anything about it. Like, well, it's important for kids to know that there is a hole there and why there's a hole there. And then we're finding hopefully more and more voices that we can add to our curriculum.
Yeah, please. And I happen to work with the primary sources. I served as board of director there for quite a few years, and they did tremendous work.
I do want to say that is one of the things we've had to cut from this budget. This will be the first year going into next year that we will not be paying for primary source, which is a heartache because teachers have taken advantage of that professional development, but that's one of our budget cuts.
And I'm very glad in your goal when you mentioned that reflect more diversity and the inclusion of those previous underrepresented. That's critical. And also we're talking about culture responsive instruction. Now that's exactly the content, but also the pedagogical, both are very meaningful and important. And I will encourage you, and probably there are a lot of factors which out of your control, but I think we have to work together. After COVID-19, now with the expansion of the Asian population, this country significantly, probably the fast growing population, minority population in this country. And plus, let me just add one more factor here. And internationally, now China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia put into one group as evil countries. And some states already passed laws that we will bar those Chinese students come here to go to universities, public universities in Texas. They tried to pass that law. And of course, not buying any houses, properties, all that. This reminds me of the Second World War, Japanese internment. If things going on, if something happened, military conflict between China and United States happened, I was not totally surprised. History will repeat itself.
That's why it's
because we're already seeing something going on now, right now.
Important that we have those civic connections still, and that I grew up in Texas, and I keep finding the holes in my education because you don't know what you don't know, and we as educators, we can't teach all history, but we have to really make sure that we prioritize and do what's right by our students.
Thank you, and I will stop here, and I cannot go on anymore. I know, but once again, I think this is so critical. We hope next generation will be more embracive. They understand better, and I hope those, really stupid, silly things will not be happening, and the horrible things like Second World War.
I know
with all those American citizens put into the prison
to see the global goals, to see the action civics pieces. I have so much hope that what I see at the middle school, that those kids will be going on to be active, citizens in our country, and I'm so hopeful whenever I leave one of those activities. So I'm with you. I hope as we go forward that we'll see a big difference.
Thank you, Anping. Go ahead, Cove.
Yeah, just to comment, and I think it kind of actually pulls together a lot of the things we're just talking about. I mean, I know that the challenge when you're studying social studies, especially K-8, is that there's a ton of content, right? You have millions of standards, literally sometimes. And so while I agree with some of the things that people are saying here, that this thing's important and that thing's important and this thing's important, you can't cover all of that, which I think what's really important about the shift in the standards is where you started with the practices. And how do we understand history? And how do we talk about history? And how do we develop? And I just want to put that on top of the last thing you're saying here, which is developing more student-centered inquiry projects. Number one, it allows students to explore things that the whole curriculum might not get to. It gives them ownership. And I was part of a couple of those civics, the 6th grade global goals, and having students explore one small thing really gives them ownership. And I think lastly, it ties into this piece about ChatGPT and all those things. I mean, you have to design assignments and ways of assessing kids' knowledge that can't be ChatGPT'd. So nobody can take their civics action project and use ChatGPT to do it.
I love saying to a kid, show me how you know this.
So yeah, I mean, it's fairly simple. So I think that tying those pieces together and making sure that you have a holistic view of things, because you're not going to get to everything. So I think that that's like how, you know, we as a group probably also need to understand, you know, what the goals would be. So that's all. Sorry.
Well stated. Thank you, Cove. Then I just want to say, echo Kathy Shields with kudos and fantastic achievement of showcasing our talented and skilled educators at Bigelow across the state. That's really phenomenal. And so good. Well done, that team. And thank you both, Alan and Liz. Thank you so much. This was thoroughly enjoyable and really enriching for us to hear. So thank you. Okay, so we will transition to our next topic. And for this, we'll be joined by Toby Romer, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, and Aisha Farag, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, for a goals update on school councils and school improvement plans.
So Madam Chair, I think, no, I just think we have changed it around a bit, that I'm going to have General Counsel Jill Murray Grady will start and talk about another layer that we added to the school.
Welcome, Jill Murray.
Yeah, and then we'll go to Toby and Aisha. I do want to say a couple of things here. I will tell you that I have had a number of conversations with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I called the Commissioner's office myself, ended up with Jessica Lates from the Commissioner's office to really, some of the things that they have on their website are not updated. I can't explain why. So again, in trying to look at where we are and where we're going, I want to make sure clearly that we have the current law, number one. Number two, I did talk to Dr. Nolan a number of times last week and just today again to clarify. And I do think it's important as we go through this discussion this evening to know she is coming in less than a month and a half, and really needs to sit with the school committee, because there are things, and it is not to blame the pandemic, but truth be told, our focus was on a lot during that pandemic. You just heard the talk about having to quickly revert to hybrid and remote, virtual, develop curriculum, make sure kids had access. I don't have to, and really, I don't want to go back, but knowing what the focus is. And it was brought early this year, Paul, I believe you had talked to me about school improvement plans. And it was interesting, having been in a number of districts and having been in my own district for a long time, I felt back then we were kind of a well-oiled machine pre-pandemic, and made sure that we had certain dates that we adhered to, elections that took place. So I do want to say I feel good about the direction we're headed in, but we do need to address some things and to get back in a regular cycle. So we'll present to you legally some thoughts about maybe best practices. We'll present about where we are currently at, but I do believe that this is something that'll be taken up, whether you call it a retreat or a workshop with the new superintendent very early on. So that's how I'd like to start. So Jill, you want to start us off?
We just put together some slides that just give a basic background outline of the law and some of the requirements and I guess recommendations from DEES. As Kathy had mentioned, well, let me back up a little bit. The law came out, this was the school council statutory language and requirement came out of the Ed Reform Act in 1993. and all the guidance and FAQs on DESI's website are dated back to 1994. So I just want to start by saying that. And so that's where we get a lot of information from, but some of it isn't updated and isn't accurate, which they've acknowledged. Not in terms of what I'm presenting today, but on a couple of conflicting things that we've asked about before. So I'm just giving a basic background that, you know, they came out this law came out at the Ed Reform Act in 1993. The purpose was to establish school-based councils, which is representative school building based committee in all public schools. They must consist of parents, teachers, and at the secondary level, students, and must be co-chaired by the school principal. Community members are allowed but aren't required at any level. It expands the participation of the school community in this particular school's decision-making for planning, goal setting, and budgeting for school improvement. So that's just the basic background. In terms of the creation and composition of school councils, the principal of each school has the responsibility for defining the composition and overseeing the formation of the council pursuant to a representative process, which is approved by the superintendent and school committee. In almost all instances, that takes the form of for the parent members, a parent teacher association or organization election for the parent members, and then the staff members. They use the word teachers, but it's really just staff at this point too. Is school-based, often peer type elections, but I'm not sure. It doesn't prescribe exactly how that side of it should work. Other members, like community members, can be appointed if that's the way it goes. It can, like I said before, it consists of parents of students attending that school, staff, and at least one student for a high school levels, and is permissible to include what we call other community members. But that contingency cannot exceed more than 50% of the total school members. I don't think that comes up very often. But what they don't want is a council of 10 with 7 members not being staff or parents of students, essentially. The size of a particular school council is not prescribed in the law. It's silent on it, but what is specified is that there needs to be parity between the parents and the staff. What that means is if there's 5 parent members, there's 5 staff representatives, and that is inclusive of the principal who is a co-chair. So it's not 11 total, it's 10. There's parity. And the school principal is by law the de facto co-chair of the school council. Some of the recommendations: the membership should broadly represent the racial and ethnic diversity of the school building and community. That's it's a guidance. The selection process, as I mentioned, parent members are selected by the parents of students that also attend the school. It's usually held by the PTO, but that should be held under the direction of the principal. So the principal needs to know what the process is and how it's going. Staff members are selected by school staff. The process must be fair, open, and without the influence of the school committee, superintendent, or principal. The terms of office of members is not specified by the law. DESE does recommend staggered terms of 1, 2, or even 3 years to accommodate continuity while encouraging fresh perspectives and increase access that results from great turnover. So you don't want a new school council every year starting over, but you also want to be inclusive and have fresh perspective. So having some sort of combination of the two is what's recommended. The principal, like I said, is the co-chair. At the first meeting of the school year, the parent co-chair is then selected. Doesn't prescribe what process. Sometimes that's an election by the school council itself. The councils are designed to assist principals in reviewing the school building budget and developing the school improvement plan. Some of the elements may include adopting educational goals for the school that are consistent with district-wide goals and policies, identifying the educational needs of students, means for meeting all students' learning needs, assessing impact of class size on student performance, an analysis of the student-teacher ratios and ratios of students to other supportive adult resources, a scheduled plan for reducing class size if necessary, PD for school staff and funds allocation. School safety and discipline is one that's important. Enhancement of parental involvement, extracurricular activities, establishment of a school environment characterized by tolerance and respect. These they don't all need to be tackled by every school council every year, but some of them often are, school safety and discipline being one of them. I know extracurricular activities, and obviously school improvement plans. The process and timeline around school improvement plans. Legally, the plans are to be submitted annually to the superintendent for approval, but after consultation with the school committee. There's no timeline set by the law, but if the school councils at the high school level are submitting changes to the handbook, which is one part of a school council at the high school level's responsibilities, is to review it every year. The submission should be before the end of the prior school year. So if they're looking at it to make changes, Toby can talk a little bit more if we get into it here. We have a district-wide code of conduct. But if changes are going to be taking place in the next fall, they should be submitted by the prior to the end of the prior school year. Other council responsibilities, they review the annual school budget. Review is the word there. It does not prescribe to be approved. The council and the principal read through, this is what they describe as what review is. The council and the principal read through the documents that describe the budget to understand the implications for items in the school improvement plan. At school councils at the high school level, as I mentioned, shall review student handbook each spring to consider changes in disciplinary policy to take effect the following school year. Again, they adopt educational goals consistent with district-wide goals. Finally, my last takeaway is school councils are subject to the open meeting law, which means they cannot deliberate outside of public session, must have a posted notice and agenda of the meeting 48 hours prior. I didn't get into all the details here, but they have to keep minutes. Often I see that on the website, the webpage of the school-based council, where they post notices. PTOs often send out the notices of the meetings as well. They're also, school councils are subject to the state conflict of interest law. So that's just something to keep in mind. Their school councils, just like school committee, are considered municipal agencies. And so members are considered municipal employees for purposes of the conflict of interest law. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy because she is going to follow up with some recommendations that are in the confines or within the framework of the legal responsibilities.
So again, looking at some recommended best practices for the election processes of all school councils should be presented to and approved by the school committee in the fall of 2023. Approval is not required annually. However, changes to a school council election process after approval should be presented to the school committee for approval going forward. And we were looking recently at bylaws for a school council at one of our schools. And quite honestly, it looks like it probably was approved in 1993-94. And that doesn't mean that that's not okay. But again, it's something that does require the school committee, to approve what is presented to them going forward. Also, recommended best practices, school improvement plan submission timeline. So here the school committee and the superintendent should identify a date for principals to submit their school improvement plans. The school committee should review the plans and consult with the superintendent. So the school committee's role is consultation with the superintendent on questions you might have on the school improvement plans, which clearly relate to your district-wide school improvement goals. And the superintendent should approve the plans at that time after consultation with the school committee. So we probably should stop there and answer questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes, and I just wanted to follow up on your recommendation about next fall. Given the state of record keeping too, it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to try to find when these processes were approved through the school committee, while they may well have been. So that's one of the basis behind the recommendation, is to kind of get this in the record, get it straight. It's been, dare I say, almost 20 years. And no, 30 years. Oh my God. And to just kind of, start the record keeping over and just kind of keep an eye on it, because there are a lot of questions that have come up, and, hopefully DESE will kind of update their guidance too, now that it's been 30 years. Thank you. Questions from the members?
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. First, a little legislative history. I've actually talked to some of the people who were involved in the legislature, and this whole provision was put in because around the same time, there was a change in the authority of the school committees themselves that shifted more authority to the superintendents. And there was a thought at the time that it would be very important to engage parents at the local school level, as well as staff, and have the school committee involvement in reviewing these school improvement plans. So it was actually a fairly substantial change that was made at that time. So Kathy, I appreciate your suggestions on best practices. I want to quibble with one of them, however, it's about Newton North. The situation at Newton North is the PTO has decided that unless a parent is going to have a child in Newton North for 3 years, that they cannot run for the school council election. So that, and it's interesting, we were talking about civics before, that disenfranchises parents, current parents of rising juniors and seniors, and also because the rising freshman parents aren't yet at the school, it disenfranchises 3 grades worth of parents in terms of the student council, the school council election run by the PTO. We could, now the election, which is taking place now, is going to determine the school council that will be working starting in September. There's no reason that PTO bylaws couldn't be changed now to have a more inclusive election, say the first week or second week of September, so those new freshman families can be involved, and also to allow people whose children will be in the school for fewer than 3 years. So I raise this as a question of fairness, civics, disenfranchisement and the like, and would urge that the change be made now so that it can be reflected in the next election of the school council at Newton North.
Can I just make one correction? It's actually not the PTO that's making the decision or the PTO's bylaws. It's actually the bylaws of the school council. The PTO is the mechanism or the representative membership that runs the elections, but the actual terms and those requirements are actually in the school council bylaws. So I just want to be clear, it's not the PTO.
And how would a school council change its bylaws?
The school council has to meet and vote to change the bylaws.
So we have a catch-22 because the parents who are currently disenfranchised from being on the school council cannot participate in a discussion to change those bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
If this were happening in a state legislature or Congress, we would be up in arms. What kind of civics lesson are we presenting here?
So I have a question, and then Emily, you've already raised your hand, but I think it follows along the lines of Paul's question. And I see we're joined by a few of our secondary principals. My question for you, Jill, is, well, Paul, I heard you say that the PTO has decided. I guess the question is, how long has this policy been in effect?
Yeah. So the bylaws, this is, I think what Kathy was getting to. The bylaws were clearly vetted. If you look at them, they're on their website, which is part of Newton North. They're clear in what the terms are, which is you have to be a parent of a student. That's clear, right? The 3-year terms that Newton North apparently has been using for I don't know how long. We don't know when they were adopted, right? That's part of what kind of brought us down this rabbit hole of we don't know when they were adopted. You know, there's been some inquiry. They might have been updated. At a minimum, we don't know when that process, that entire electoral process that should be approved by the school committee, that could have been done in 1994. So we don't know. It's been many years from what I understand that those bylaws have been in effect, which prescribe that term. What I will say is, you know, the law's silent on that and schools are doing different things. Certainly it makes sense that a middle school might have different terms of office than an elementary school or high school, but I don't even know if there's, symbiosis even between our levels. We haven't done a deep dive yet. I was really just looking at the legal piece of it.
Okay. Emily, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I think I can't speak specifically to what's going on at North, because I also don't know if they've consistently had school council running through the entirety of the pandemic. And if that stopped, then this concept of having these 3-year terms would have been rolling. So if somebody wanted to join school council for the 3-year term, which also, by the way, when I was at South was a very similar situation as well, that people, and then we actually had 8th grade parents, like we allowed for 8th grade parents who were going to be incoming the next year to put their hat in the ring. And I can think of the years that I was on council at South, at least twice that happened, if not 3 times, where an incoming 8th grade parent was able to join and be on the South Council. I can't speak to what's going on at North, but the interruption piece, I think, is what's really screwing us up right now. That's my guess, but I don't have the full information. That aside, I just want to confirm something, because I'm a little confused, because everything that you said, I was like, I know that, because I read the law. I thought that the community member was a requirement. Not more than one, but a community member is a requirement.
It could be possible that I misread it.
No,
because I
I'm
thought
sure
it was they're permissible but not required.
Okay.
But what I will do while you guys are doing other questions, I'll look it up.
It's a small thing. I will also say that I think one of the reasons why there's some confusion between the school council and PTO bylaws is that PTOs are the ones who run the actual elections. And so it's very confusing as to who's responsible for what. So.
Thanks, Emily. Go ahead, Anping.
I just like to add my experience when my daughter was at Newton North. I decided to run, and I was told my daughter was, rising senior. So I was told you could be alternative member, but not the voting member, unless you had your daughter junior year. So I guess probably I really want to see that language. 3 years, I thought a little bit too long. So you exclude the junior and the senior parents. I think I have problem with that. But anyway, I served 1 year, but I could not vote. Basically, I sit there listening, I could speak. So just add my experience.
How
Thanks.
long ago was that, Anping? I'm asking you to date.
28. Oh boy, 20. My daughter graduated from college 2 years now.
Okay, so the process has been in place
20,
again.
yeah,
a
16,
while.
17-ish. Yeah.
So can I address that?
Sure thing.
I did have a parent reach out to me, and the parent was concerned. And when you look at the intent of the law, it does talk about, access. I mean, you saw it, the makeup of the community. It's interesting because I used to feel like we had to beg people to get involved and to take these spots. And Emily, to your comment, I actually thought the community member was a must. So you'd look to a local business or somebody, a higher education, and that offered so much to have another perspective. That being said, that was my call immediately to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, because we were concerned with some things that we were seeing conflicting on the website. So you can see that the information we're sharing, the best of our knowledge, is the terms can be 1, 2, or 3 years. And you as a school committee can decide what that means to the community. Do you look at, if you want consistency, maybe there are a couple of 3-year terms, maybe there's a 2-year term. That is discussion. And that's why I said that whether it's a workshop, you can actually decide if you want the same thing to be throughout the district with all your elementary schools, maybe something different because of the grade configuration for your middle and your high schools. But that is the opportunity. And as I said, it met legal muster as far as North had these guidelines. They've been there for a long time. Whether they're the best practice or not, that is for the school committee to decide. So to step in at this point, and to ask them to, pause their elections. As I said, I think the best practices you have right now, and an opportunity for some of those parents, even the parent that connected with me. You know, you can change them and there are still a couple of years depending on what you want to do to make sure parents do have access. And we want people to feel included and have differences or a variety, not differences of opinion, excuse me.
Chris, did I see you? Okay, go ahead, Chris. And then Kathy.
So thanks Jill and Kathy for doing a little work here. As Jill, I told you about this a number of times. This has been a little bit of a rub for me. Is, you know, we've just not fulfilled our statutory duty. And yeah, there was a pandemic. I could make the argument that there was never a more important time to have school councils than during the pandemic, as many parents felt disenfranchised. So I have a couple like just very quick basic questions on the Newton North situation in general. So I assume these 3-year terms are not staggered, or else we probably wouldn't be having this issue.
I'm not, I actually don't know. What do you mean by staggered? Like they are.
Like there's
it's
9
not a
members of
turnover
the
every
council,
3 years.
3 of them are reelected every couple of years to 3-year terms. That's not the case. It's the full.
No, I don't think it's a full turnover. Every 3 years, a full turnover of the committee. I believe, my understanding is that they're staggered, but I actually don't have.
Are you asking about the Newton North?
Yeah,
School council?
The situation we're talking about acutely here in Newton North.
Yeah, my understanding is the terms are staggered, so every year there are seats available.
Okay, so every year there is seats available. Okay. A second, how many functioning school councils do we have right now?
We have, so we have folks ready to speak tonight, principals and parents who are members of school councils at the elementary, middle, and high school. It may be helpful to proceed with a presentation for context. Our school councils are up and running in all of our schools. Many of them continued straight through the pandemic. Others may have taken a hiatus or met infrequently while we were in the Zoom world. But there's lots of great work going on, school improvement plans being developed for the law, and regular meetings of the school council. So we'll hear a couple samples of those whenever you're ready to do that part of the presentation.
So there is a functioning school council in every school right now. Okay, we're just not getting the school improvement, or haven't been getting the school improvement plans. And
yeah, it hasn't been the school committee's practice to review the school improvement plans during my tenure in Newton Public Schools, which is 8 years. So if certainly you can see the laws here, but yeah.
I'm sorry, can I just?
Sure thing. Go ahead.
So just in terms of Kathy, what you were suggesting in terms of, there's the ability of us to effectively push down onto the schools what these election processes would be. That was like the legal interpretation that Desi gave you. The only reason I ask is the statute says the principal, except as otherwise provided herein, shall have the responsibility for defining composition, forming group, representative process approved by the superintendent school committee. It sounded like it comes to us, we approve it. I guess de facto, we could say we're not going to approve anything that isn't this, and we're in the same place. Is that where
that is what I meant by that.
Okay,
correct.
To
And
say that we got Bessie guidance, I wouldn't say we really got much. So I'm just saying this is, so when we haven't gotten any additional, let's just put that, Kathy had some conversations, but in terms of like nitty gritty than what's out there, this is just our interpretation, which we believe is correct, of the legal requirements. So yes, the electoral process, it's supposed to be overseen by the principal, but at some point in time, whether it's when it changes or from the beginning in 1994, it should have been approved by the school committee. So that's why we're recommending, given that we don't know when all these were done, what changes have been made, to kind of almost clear the decks and start over. And then going forward, it doesn't have to be done annually, but if a change is going to be made to a process at a school council, perhaps our recommendation is that perhaps that come before the school committee for review and approval at that point. But at this right now, given that we don't know a lot of that, and it likely was not, the record keeping and all that, we're just recommending to kind of clear the decks, given that we're trying to right the ship and make sure we're all on the same page.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
I do.
Chris.
I'm sorry. I do have the Newton North bylaws, and so a maximum of 6 parent representatives can be selected through an open election process conducted by the PTSO. Each is selected to serve 3-year term, must have a child attending Newton North for the entirety of this period. Current parent members cannot serve consecutive terms of office, and the terms of serving parent representatives are staggered to ensure continuity, retain institutional knowledge, and to minimize turnover in any one year. And of course, if a parent is unable to fill their term somebody is selected to fill the remainder of that term.
So that, guys, is that an annual election then? So staggered, so you have two seats
I
open
would
every.
think that's.
I don't know if it, I think, or we're getting into the weeds now, but like if you saw, like the guidance that was created when the law came out was in the first year, you should have a 1-year term, a 2-year term, right? So that you can start that turnover. I don't know if the exact numbers work out, if it's 6, if it's 2 every year. I don't know how that's played out since 1994. But I do know, I happen to know that there's an election this year for a couple seats in Newton North. So it's presumed with these types of staggered terms, there's at least one, if not more, every year of an open seat.
Kathy, Kathy and then Emily. Go ahead.
I just have a very big comment. I think the sense of that regulation or of that bylaw is to ensure, it sounds like that each class has 2 representatives, so that you have 2 sophomore parents, 2 junior parents, and 2 senior parents, and then you turn over when the senior parents graduate, you're adding 2 more sophomore parents. So it sounds to me like there is some sense to the 3-year term requirement to ensure an even distribution among classes, rather than being a tool of disenfranchisement.
And multiple opportunities to raise your hand within that window. Go ahead, Emily.
So 2 things. One is that if we do eventually get into talking more about what elections should look like as a school committee, I would strongly recommend that we have at least a minimum of a 2-year term, just because having been on many school councils now, usually the actions there and in the school improvement plans are things that last more than 1 year. I can especially say in the secondaries that that's the case. And I'm sure that the people who are on the call can chime in also. But I also just want to quickly say, because I'm the old person in the room, school committee did used to vote on school improvement plans. That was a thing, and they did that. School improvement plans were anywhere from 30 to 50 pages long, and it included things like air quality and mold and building conditions, aside from the educational piece as well. And then what happened about 10 years ago is the template, which we got a copy of, ties directly into the system-wide goals. And then because the school committee voted, I think I was not on a school committee at the time, but I think that the logic was because they're tied to system-wide goals was already voted on by the school committee. Therefore, the school committee did not have to vote on every single individual one. I personally would be happy to look and vote and discuss what the individual SIPs are, but that's me. And I think a conversation for either later tonight or a different day. So.
Thank you, Emily. Cove, did I see you wanting to make a question or questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I mean, first of all, I do want to point out that we are talking, when I was a principal and I had a school council, I had to beg people to be on the school council. So I think that we need to recognize the involvement and the commitment of our community, that we're even talking about elections and how long people are going to serve. I hear, Emily, about the 2-year commitment. I think that, you know, it's a commitment that's longer than the school committee. So I think that, like, I imagine that there is turnover as people's life changes and everything. So I think you need to build that flexibility in. I also think that when you read those regulations that Jill just read to us, that the reality is often different than that. And I just want to also stress, like, it feels like when you read that these are the only people that are having influence over things that are happening at the school. Really, the school improvement plan is not at all the sole responsibility of the school council. They are consulting with them. It is the teachers, it's the principals, it's coming down from the district. So I feel like, you know, it's important, and it's a statutory thing, and it's a way to have a process, but it's not, that's not the only people that are contributing to the school improvement plan. And I feel like that's important to say, because I think that, you know, you have the PTO that has influence over certain areas of the school. You have all these different ways to be involved. So it's also not the only way you can be involved. So anyway, that's my comment. And I think, you know, whether we approve, you know, individual school improvement plans across Newton, that seems like a lot given the number of schools we have. But I think that, you know, some kind of in general, you know, batches of them.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that the school committee doesn't vote to approve the plans.
So the
I just like heard
superintendent
vote
approves
and
after
approve. I just want to,
consultation.
yeah, there should be involvement and oversight and review, but
Yes.
then, so I don't know. In terms of practice, how it can come up, well, there's been a confusion. That's the only reason why I'm pointing it out. whether it's a batch of them and you look at them and then there's a, you know, a school committee meeting and you have questions, maybe you have questions on a couple of them, but I'm not sure it's painstakingly review each one, but that's up to you all.
So thank you. Thank you for that really good point you made, Cove. Appreciate it. And for anyone who's observing this meeting, wondering why we are spending quite a bit of time talking about Newton North wanting to serve in this very important role to represent their schools and the other members of the PTO, PTSO at that point. You know, I think it's another point that you made, Cove, that's really good, is that oftentimes life intervenes in best wishes or best aspirations of wanting to volunteer. And so when I look at a process like the one we're talking about at Newton North, and I see, you know, they have a bunch of people raising their hands to do this, I think there's something there that is working according to design, and that it recognizes the fact that people are going to be cycling on, cycling off, and allows that to take place. So I think with that, we will happily transition. Thank you, Jill, for your piece, but let's transition to hearing or looking a little bit more in depth at some of these school improvement plans at elementary and secondary level now.
Hi there.
And please introduce.
I will. We'll start introducing the team that we have with us here today. I think by way of, before they get started, just to give a little bit of an overview of how we tackle school improvement plans. All of our schools have school improvement plans in place or are in the process of working on them for with their current school councils. The plans are all aligned with the system-wide goals, as you heard earlier. And at the different levels, we have a like template. So there's an elementary template and a secondary template. And what's important to note is that coming off of the district goals, the teams then work together at levels to have some things in common. There's work that we share because we're all one district, and there are things that we need to be united in our approach around. From there, so those things are listed at the top of the template, and you'll notice that they look very similar. They're very closely tied to the system-wide goals. The bottom portion is the section in which each school details their own school site-specific initiatives. And I have to tell you, we really encourage people to keep that limited. It is not intended to capture, these improvement plans are not intended to capture every single thing that a school is doing or working on or aspires to over the course of the year, but rather those things that are most significant, those things we want to make sure that we're working on, those kinds of things that we're actively working on with the school councils and as a team throughout the course of the year. It's also important to note that despite the fact that you may not have seen these plans in recent years, they continue to be developed. Schools continue to have plans that they were actively working on even throughout the course of the pandemic. And that while the mechanism may have been a little different with some of the school councils not having met during that time, there was certainly communication with PTOs and those school council members who were still on board at the time in terms of keeping people informed about the work that was going on. The idea of improvement is very much embedded in the work our leaders and their teams are doing every single day. So I think that's just important to highlight. What you'll hear from tonight, we have three principals and a couple of members of teams, I think, that are with them. We have Andrea Vargas from Pierce joining us today. We have Jackie Mann from Day, and we have Tammy Strauss from South here today. I'm going to turn things over to Andrea to get us started with an example from the elementary level of the work of at Pierce.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Vargas, the principal of Pierce, as Aisha introduced me. And I'll share an example from our school that is representative, certainly, of the other elementary schools. But you'll see, as is the case in each school, we'll have some unique things to individualize the work to support our needs as a school. We are the members of our school council this year consists of 2 parents, 2 teachers, and a community member. I'm laughing a little bit about the election process since we did not need one at Pierce. 2 parents, I'm very grateful, volunteered, and we needed 2 parents for the role. So I'd like to say they were unanimously elected for those positions. Our 2 parents, I'll just acknowledge, are Sam Brenner, and also we have with us tonight on this presentation, Kay Mukherjee. Our Pierce teachers are 5th grade teacher Kelly Champagne, and also Georgia Smith are our teacher. And we have an extended day program teacher, Joanne Maloof, who also contributes to the council. I think that's a great example of a community membership, since we like to work in concert with our extended day program at Pierce. As for our accomplishments this year, we developed a school improvement plan earlier in this school year, and now we have a draft of one for the upcoming year. Certainly, well, let me go back for a moment. I'd just like to describe a little bit of our process in terms of using the template that Aisha shared, where we have school, or rather district-wide goals, for example, around academic excellence. We took that umbrella, that broader view on academic excellence, and thought what that could mean for Pierce, for example, in the year ahead. Now, part of my job as a new principal to Pierce was gathering data and information to shape our goals in the year ahead. And in doing so, I recognized through various data points that we have many academic strengths at Pierce, but certainly writing instruction is an area for growth for us. So our goals next year under academic excellence will be pretty specific to writing instruction and tools to boost student outcomes in writing overall. The school council was also very, very helpful to me in the entry process I just touched upon. For a new principal, it's incredibly important to use all different sources of data. Someone said earlier, or maybe a few people said, how the school council is just one voice or one source of collaboration that the principal will have, but it's a really important one. And in my situation as a new principal, this was a great group to lean upon to check if my read on the school was correct. I was also able to demonstrate a presentation, a caregiver presentation on my entry plan and envisioning for Pierce with the school council before delivering it to the wider community. And I got some great feedback from parents, staff, and our community member about that presentation that really helped define the presentation itself and shape our specific goals for the year ahead as well. Finally, I'm really proud that this group was helpful in designing a presentation around math instruction. A lot of elementary parents continue to wonder about our newer ways of teaching math and how we can support students at home, how we can enrich their understanding of math. So you'll see pictured here, Kelly Champagne, a student council member, also 5th grade teacher, is here with Erin Tracy, a 1st grade teacher, giving a presentation that was put together largely from parent input from Kay and other members of our school council. So that was really helpful, and we received very positive feedback on that. Kay, would you like to share anything about your experience as a parent on our school council?
Yeah, thank you. I've just been really delighted with the process, and I think all the parents that I've been sort of speaking to as it relates to my involvement on the council have a lot of questions or feedback, and so it's been a great way to make sure that parent voices are heard. And I think Principal Vargas does a great job of incorporating that into her planning. I think you touched on a lot of the things that we've been able to do. One of the things that I was happy about is we were able to advocate on behalf of a lot of the parents that want enrichment to be a focus as well as sort of intervention. And so I think that was an important point for many families, and Principal Vargas was good enough to make that change and that adjustment in the plan. And I think a lot of people were really happy and pleased with that. So I thought that was great. And the entry plan was really well received by a lot of the families who were wondering, you know, what Principal Vargas had planned for the school and if there would be any changes. And I thought that was a really great connection with the community for Principal Vargas. And we were thrilled to provide some feedback on that. I thought the math presentation was really well received by most of the families that attended. And I think they're clamoring for a literacy one now. And that was because the feedback from the school community was used to design the presentation. And I think that was really a best practice. And we were really grateful. So it's really been collaborative between the parents and the school community and the caregivers, as well as Principal Vargas and her team. So we've been really pleased with that. It's been great.
Thank you, Kay. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how I've described my entry plan process as unique to the experience of a first-year principal in Newton. But truly, this is actually a cyclical process. Continually throughout my career and in other schools with more tenured principals, we'll have to evaluate and learn about our schools, learn from the data, learn from all our community members, and shape our plans accordingly. So this process will only continue and build from here. I just also want to mention another really valuable suggestion I had from our parent members on the school council, which was add a glossary. We tend to use a lot of jargon in our plans for teaching and instruction and building and maintaining a school. A glossary is really helpful for all those acronyms and terms that are really teacher language specific. So again, I have a great deal of thanks to you and your contributions, Kay, as well as the other members of our council.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I'm going to turn it to our next level presentation. We have Jackie Mann here, the principal at FA Day Middle School, who I know is joined, I believe, by a parent representative from their school council, Christine Dutt. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Toby. Good evening, everyone. Really happy to be here. I think you know I'm Jackie Mann, proud principal of Day Middle School. I have a wonderful co-chair, Christine Dutt. Christine, do you want to say hello to folks?
Hello, I'm really happy to be here, and I love our school council. We've had a great year so far, very productive.
Christine and I are really co-chairs, and they're all intents and purposes. We grapple with every agenda together, working session. Her promise to me is, I think my experience since my 6th year at Day has been, you know, what we really don't want is this process. And I would say this to all of you who are going to be weighing in on this process and what it looks like going forward. You don't want it to be a box checker. It has the possibility for being a really vibrant, living process that really informs our school improvement. And I think that's where it wants to be. And sometimes that's a little messy. And I don't know if that's a middle school thing. I was laughing when Andrea said, you know, we're asking parents to please get involved. And that's kind of like, I'm a little envious of Newton North, I have to be honest. However, that said, we have 5 amazing parent members, and we've been working together for over a year now, well over a year. And so we're now trying to recruit more faculty members to, as you notice through the state laws indicate we should have parity in the numbers of staff members and parent members. So right now our parent group sort of outweighs our faculty members in numbers, but we're working on that. We have 5 amazing parents who have been working with us since I think last winter. And we'll talk a little bit about our work that we've been engaged in. We also do have a community member. And as I mentioned, Christine and I are the co-chairs. I want to take a minute to talk about the reinvigoration of our process, because I really do felt early on the history of school councils, at least at Day when I started 6 years ago, was really meaningful in that it brought parents to the table to sort of do a focus area and a goal. And we'll talk about how we're continuing that tradition as part of the Day process, because I think that's important. But that goal is also part of our school improvement plan. And I think this, over the past year and a half, we reinvigorated the process through parent feedback. At the end of one of the years of school council, I had a parent member say to me, Jackie, I'm so happy to do this work with you, but quite honestly, I'm not sure what my role is. And that was sort of a wake-up call to like, what is our role? What are we doing here? We created a job description for every council member so they know what their expectations are. Often what happens in my experience, even in former districts, is we'd end the school council meeting and the principal would go do the work. So we really turned into a highly effective working group, and I'm really proud of that. Christine will talk about that in a minute, but I think that part I would recommend and is really important. What is the job responsibilities and role when you sign? I'm sure as school committee members, you have something similar. And that was really helpful so that people, when they were, you know, in some schools running for office or running to be on school council and other places volunteering, what would be your responsibility in the role? And I think Jill did a really nice job bringing us back to the mandates, but also what does it look like in each school? So I'm going to talk about Day Middle School, but also I'm representative, really, we are in line, all 4 middle schools. Our processes are very similar. I would imagine if my colleagues were here, they'd also say, like, we're grateful to have the parent volunteers that we have, and we really want to find this work meaningful. So talked a little bit about how our process got reinvigorated, and we held on to this tradition a day of having the parents help us identify a goal area. What's an area for improvement that we want to focus on? In past years, school council has collaborated with the PTO on turning that into a parent event. I know at Day, my second year here, we ran a parent conference that we offered. We had 80 middle school parents, which, you know, getting 80 middle school parents to show up in person is a huge feat because everyone's so busy. We did a conference on what is it to be a middle school parent. We've run panels on that. And that was through the efforts of a collaboration of school council and PTO, knowing all along that our real goal was to create a school improvement plan, but this was sort of folded into that. So we kept that idea of a focus area in addition to doing our work this year of completing a school improvement plan. Christine's going to talk a little bit about our process, but we did finally vote on it, I believe, Christine, last month, correct? We have an approved school improvement plan. So Christine will talk a little bit about our process and getting the school improvement plan. And then we'll come back to me and I'll talk a little bit about this tradition that we're staying with the Day of continuing in this focus area. Turn it over to Christine.
Great. So as a group, we were talking about how should we figure out what school council should be focused on. And we recognize that we're a relatively small group of parents and thought that it would be helpful for us to have input from the broader community. So we devised a survey, albeit an imperfect one, and asked parents, you know, gave them sort of 4 areas under each of the 3 focus areas of the district under academic excellence, educational equity, and social and emotional learning, and said, here are some options in this area. What's your priority? And so we thought that that was really helpful and informative for us to hear what our fellow parents at the school think and what they find important. We had 144 respondents. There were 2, I think, themes that were most prominent. And those were to focus on academic excellence and student achievement, and also to increase the quality of communication, not necessarily the quantity of communication, but the quality of communication, specifically around how the school and teachers communicate about student progress, both through report cards and through student progress reports. Jackie, do you want to talk about the alignment and then I'll talk about parent input and faculty input, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I can jump in and talk. So we landed, I think we talked about, I mean, one of the things that we'll sort of preview is that we realized out of, 927 families, 114 is not a lot. So we'll talk about how that fed into our work. But I think how it led to our school improvement areas is we then focused in on the 3 district goals, as Aisha already identified. Our purpose is to align with the district goals. So under excellence, we talked about the need and the challenges of the Day staff in middle schools, and I think all the schools in Newton are on meeting the diverse needs of our students. We have some students are at broad spectrums, and what does that look like? Our focus at Day has been on creating highly effective teams, both at the multidisciplinary teams that we place children on and our grade level department teams, and how are we folding in our work on universal design learning and culture responsive instruction to create lesson plans that meet the diverse needs of students, challenge students based on where they are and move them forward, and also create culture responsive classrooms. So that's been a major focus of our work and our professional development with staff. Our after school professional development at Day is really focused on giving back time to those highly effective teams and identifying measurables. I think one of the themes that came out of our conversations with the parents that Christine will talk about is how are we being accountable for our work? So if we're dedicating time, and time is the biggest resource we have, but we're dedicating time to this work, how are we measuring the impact on student learning? So we'll keep coming back to that theme. Another area we focused on around Excellence a Day was we've had some pilots and some work around standards-based feedback. What that means is really drilling down to what are the standards in math and in science and in ELA and social studies, and specifically what are the children making progress in and what are their areas for growth, even to the point where the students themselves are familiar with that. So our teachers have experimented with different platforms. Some of you may have experienced it as a middle school parent, how we're offering feedback for students in a timely manner, but very explicit feedback and the dramatic impact that has on student growth and learning. That has taken a lot of time of our teaching staff that we used in professional development. Under equity, we've had a broader focus as we do across the district of creating a more inclusive school community. How that looks like and what it looks like a day is both parallel work with faculty and students. We've had 4 school-wide community days on early release days a day this year. We continue to plan them going forward based on feedback from students and staff around identity, around discrimination and bias, around microaggressions. We've had students from Newton North show up and talk about what it means to be a day middle school student. The most powerful thing that we're beginning to fold in, however, is this feedback element. How is this being received by teachers? And how is this being received by students? What's the impact on student learning? So we've had student groups give us feedback and help mold the lessons this year, which is a huge area for growth for us. In addition to that, Christine already talked about this idea of communication in middle school. And this already, many of you that have experienced being parents of middle schoolers, as your children come to us, your children are kind of working on their independence and pushing away a little bit. That means that we have to be more intentional and more skilled at communicating about student progress. So that came out through our survey. It also came out as a goal area under our work around equity, because what we know is 144 parent responses to a survey means we have to find a different way to communicate with families. So our focus at Day is what are the different vehicles that we can use for communication around progress, and what is the parent information that we need to share about accessing some of the platforms like Schoology and Aspen that we're using. And one of our ongoing goals is a district goal. We debated, because I think Aisha did a nice job of saying, well, we can't have schools reflect everything that they're doing. And I know this is a district goal, but it's very important to us at Day that the staff hiring is reflective of the diversity of our student body. And so that's an ongoing thing that I asked our school council to make me accountable for as a building leader. And we talked about strategies and collaboration with the central office staff on doing that. And lastly, under social emotional learning, we've done a lot of work at Day, and I know they have at all of the middle schools in Newton around our advisory program. We're looking to make it a little bit more authentic at Day, more uniquely to Connections. We pulled out some of the lessons around race and identity and put them on community days and made advisory really about check-ins with students. How are they doing? Community building. And that's really gone well. We're looking to make some adjustments again next year with the goal of, taking a large community and turning it into smaller families. Also, we've done a lot of work this year with student agency and voice. I mentioned under equity, we have students that are taking leadership roles and looking at the lessons that we're doing with other students. And so, we have a teen speak out model, student advisory council. We need to expand the opportunity for student leadership and voice at Day. And so that's really another goal area. And lastly, loud and clear through this survey, we heard from parents, please, more extracurricular enrichment activities. That's important to parents. We know that it really leads to strong social emotional skills for our students and also connectivity with our school community. So that's going to be an ongoing goal. So those are some of the very specific action steps under the goal areas a Day. And Christine, want to say a word about the role and power of the input of different stakeholder members?
Yeah, I actually sort of want to take a sort of a big step back and talk about our process as a school council, because I think that that's really been the power of this group and sort of where we really shine as a group. In all honesty, we made 2 big overhauls of the school improvement plan as we were working through it this year. And that's a result of parent input and a result of faculty input. And it's been very collaborative. And I think we tried real hard, as Principal Vargas was talking about jargon and acronyms, that the parents looking at the school improvement plan were like, wait a second, I don't understand what this acronym means. This I understand sort of what these words mean when you spell them out, but you put them together and it's a term that we're not familiar with. And on the whole, this is a group of fairly engaged parents. And so I think that also speaks to the need for greater communication, right, to parents at all levels, whether it's elementary or secondary. And we also had just a very powerful discussion about goals. Were the goals ambitious enough? Were they concrete enough? Was this work we were already, faculty are already doing? What are the steps we need to take from where we are today to reach the goal that's in the school improvement plan? And one of the things that school council committed to do is to essentially add another column for our own internal use that puts in some concrete steps and some measurements that we hope to be able to pay attention to. And we've built into our agenda for this year and talked about how when would be an appropriate spot to look at it next year so that we can hold ourselves accountable for what's been set out in the school improvement plan. And I really want to give credit to Jackie for creating an environment where both the faculty and the parents are comfortable saying, wait, I don't understand this. Why are we doing this? Can we step back and do it this way? And people are very comfortable expressing their concerns or asking questions and constructive disagreement in a way that moves the conversation forward and to, I think, a very much a better place. I think that tone of openness and trust and the idea that we're all in this together and this is a collaboration has been just amazing and has been I hope it's been very helpful to Jackie. It's very rewarding for me to see this group work in this way.
Christine, thank you. I echo that. I mentioned the word, it's a messy process, like progress is messy. That means you have to have open dialogue. And I think what the parents and faculty have brought to the table is accountability. Like we have to remember this has to come back to student learning. What is the impact on our students? And we want to hold each other accountable, and that piece is important. So as part of our cycle of agendas, we will periodically check in on accountability measures, and that part is really important. The last step at day will be presenting the school improvement plan and having our staff interact with it and grapple with it. And we imagine to be able to tweak it again before we present it in the fall. I know we're running over time. One last word, because I'm really proud of the work that we will be doing around our focus area. We mentioned this already. Communicating and partnering with parents around student progress. It's confusing, right? Not intentionally, no one's trying to do it, but we use platforms like Schoology and Aspen, and they create barriers unintentionally. So based on our survey feedback, we've already worked with some consultants around using different platforms, texting families for quick communication. We have some teachers piloting with that. In addition to that, giving orientation for families. If we want you to partner with us, how are we going to make you familiar with the platform that we're using with your children around how we're measuring and communicating their progress? Those things are really important, particularly for communities that are typically marginalized and not accessing my 10-page long newsletters every day that I'm working on getting shorter. So really proud of that work. We hope to be able to talk more about that, hopefully invite us back next year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And thank you, Christine. We appreciate you guys being here. Next, we're going to go to the high school level and really excited to be joined by Principal Tammy Strauss from Newton South and parent school council member Jen Martin. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you, Toby. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Tammy Strauss, principal of Newton South. Following Jackie's footsteps is pretty intimidating, not going to lie, but I'm going to do my best. So just in terms of our membership, we have 6 amazing parents. We have a community member, 3 teachers, 4 students. Typically, they sit on school council for 2 terms. So last year being my first year at South, it was last year and then this year. So we're going through the process. We will be going through the process re-election and all of that soon. So there's 2 kind of big areas, if you will, of focus this year. One is the piece of the school improvement plan that we are currently in process of looking at. And then another piece is improving traffic patterns of South, because you know, when I was hired to be principal of South, I was told I had to fix traffic on Route 9. So that's my job right now. So just so that you all know, we meet monthly for an hour and a half, and our school council has work time built within those meetings, because I don't have an expectation that anyone's going to be doing homework outside of those meetings. And these two major groups are self-selected groups based on interest, if you will. So our school improvement plan is 100% modeled after the district system-wide goals. So within the three major buckets of academic excellence, educational equity, and social emotional well-being. Just an example of each of those. So we have a MTSS system that really was not, again, I'm jargon here, like multi-tiered systems of support, that really wasn't looked at for over 10 years. As you all know, the pandemic kind of changed the scope and the needs of our students. So we, you know, under the academic excellence piece, we really wanted to look at the general ed supports that we have in the building, and we've made a lot of progress to an already existing really good system, but we've kind of moved it forward. In terms of educational equity, you know, we want to make sure that we are still using our anti-racist lens to ensure that we are committed to equity in all forms. We have PD that is that happens almost monthly on Tuesdays based on equity and excellence that is delivered by our SHRC. So that's an example of how we're doing that. We are currently looking at our curricula and what's going on within our curricula units. For our social emotional well-being, again, we want to make sure that we kind of keep this going in terms of the growth and development of all students. Last year was really hard coming back from the pandemic. This year, I have definitely seen a vast improvement in kind of students, and the fact that they now are in high school and they're significantly more settled. That being said, though, social emotional well-being also comes with the physical safety of schools, and this is where that traffic piece comes in. Kind of all jokes aside, unfortunately, last year, very early in the year, we did have a young student who was attempting to cross the street from the woods into South and was in the crosswalk and unfortunately got hit by a parent, and that has happened a couple of times since then. As you all know, working with people on the city side and trying to figure all of those pieces out, we needed a little bit of help. So our wonderful parent, Jen Martin, who's a parent now at South, kind of joined us to help push that train forward. So I'm actually going to hand it over to Jen to talk a little bit about what she has helped us move with traffic in conjunction with Safe Routes to School. Thank you for being here, Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Principal Strauss. And I'll clarify that I am not on school council. I am working with school council. I am this year a Newton South student, but I started working with school council last year in my role as chair of the Newton Safe Routes to School Task Force. And thank you for including me in those discussions, Principal Strauss. And I wanted to echo what Kay had said earlier, that school council is really an opportunity to make sure parent, student, and staff voices are heard. But then the next step is, once they're heard, how are those concerns acted on? And these safety concerns at Newton South were brought to my attention through the parents on school council, and also brought to the attention to the School Transportation Steering Group, which is a joint effort of Newton Public Schools and the City of Newton. As chair of the Newton Safe Routes to School Task Force, I also sit on that group. So working with those two groups and school council, we've been able to accomplish quite a bit. And again, this is by bringing together different stakeholders, including several student groups in Newton who are also concerned about safety, and other students at the school who separately and unbeknownst to school council were working on some bike safety as well. And the reason this is so critical is an efficient, less stressful morning arrival routine means students, first of all, arrive at school on time, which is a concern at all schools, and also arrive at school ready to learn. As Principal Strauss mentioned, we've had a number of students who have been hit by drivers either on the way to school or on the way leaving school. Newton South's location and the residential neighborhood with most students needing to travel along Brandeis Road and then Lion Drive, means that there aren't really other options. The Newton School Committee Wellness Policy encourages modes of travel other than private vehicles, including bus, van, shared transit like Numo, walking, rolling, or biking. So if there are concerns about safety of students walking, rolling, or biking, it just leads to more vehicles on the road. More vehicles on the road means buses are unable to get to school on time. So I want to focus on some of the successes that we've had with School Council, School Transportation Steering Group, and Safe Routes to School. These are all in the last year. So the crosswalk where the driver hit the student in front of the school was quickly made safer by adding flex posts so drivers make a wider left turn exit. 20-mile-per-hour safety zones were added on Brandeis Road and Lion Drive, reducing the speed limit from 30 to 20 miles per hour, which makes a large difference in student safety. Brandeis Road and Lion Drive were added to the list of locations to be evaluated as part of DPW's traffic calming evaluation and prioritization process. Newton South supported Newton's successful application for a MassDOT Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant. This is coming back to what Tammy mentioned about solving traffic on Route 9. This is at Parker Street and Route 9, and it will make it safer for students to walk, bike, or roll through that intersection. We helped facilitate the work of students in a Newton South sustainability class who are working on piloting a one-day protected bike lane on Brandeis Road to test the feasibility of adding bike lanes to Brandeis Road, Lion Drive. And finally, we're working with those same students to get the covered bike shelter repaired, which we found out is covered under a warranty, which is exciting. We're also looking at improving security around the bike racks. Again, converting more students who are driven or who are arriving by private vehicle to being able to walk, bike, or take the bus will really help with traffic congestion in this whole area. So thank you for looping me in to School Council and this goal. I'm excited at what we can accomplish in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much, Jen. Toby, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Tammy and Jen, and thanks to all the principals and school council members who help present and give examples of the work that's happening in each of our schools. Happy to open it up for questions from there if there are more questions for any of the folks who presented tonight.
Great, thank you. Questions from the members? Go ahead, Chris.
So my big question is, thank you everyone for all the information. My big question is how we're planning on moving forward or not moving forward with this in terms of Jill's suggestion that, you know, we sort of take a bit of a fresh start here. And just one thing to note, I believe the Pierce Council doesn't meet the parity standard in the statute.
But yeah, I mean, my recommendations, which are based on what I assume you're talking about is next year, just kind of having the electoral processes be reviewed and approved by the school committee. I'm not making any recommendations in terms of content and exactly how these school improvement plans. That is not my area. I'm going to leave that to the experts. Mine's just more about process and then about, submitting the SIPs for review and approval by the superintendent.
So my recommendation, again, after consultation with Dr. Nolan, is going forward to start fresh with all of your schools, to have a workshop, a time where school committee gets to talk about some of the recommendations that they would like to see on your school councils. Or what you can do is look at the guidelines and say, follow the guidelines, 1, 2, or 3 years, present your plans to us for approval. Once they're approved, because that is your role, it remains that's how they operate until they might come forward with this didn't work. Would like to submit a different form or a different plan for our school councils. You would then approve that, and it would replace, if you so approve, the previous plan. So we're talking about having a baseline starting fresh, because we know something exists. I was showing you the bylaws that the school council at North, I used that as an example. We can't go back, find minutes when it was approved. We just don't have that information.
So this is like fall's business, you think?
I would do it as early as possible. So that next school year, when everybody comes back, I doubt your councils are meeting this summer. It gives you an opportunity with Dr. Nolan to talk about the very information we just presented.
Thanks, Chris. I think one thing to keep in mind, and that Jackie articulated very well, is it is a messy process. I know on Ping, you shared that you had served on a school council. Cove, you've been the principal chairing the school councils. Emily, you've been on a school council. Kathy, you've been on a school council. I have been on a school council. Rajiv, not quite sure. Oh, Rajiv has not been on a school council, and I imagine that's true of several members as well. But the important takeaway here is that it is a good collaborative relationship between that bridges that connection between the parents and the PTSOs and the principals, and has that, really deliberative communication stream where parent concerns are elevated and they're working and sharing together. And so to your point, Chris, we will do our part of reviewing and making updated recommendations for these school councils, but I don't know that that's going to be a very very express process on our part. We've got a lot of schools. And so if we're looking in depth at each school council, that's not going to be accomplished in a school committee meeting, but it might be something that we can work as a team in a retreat or a workshop or something. And so we'll have to think about how to best do that, and certainly work closely with our incoming superintendent to make sure that that's a very thoughtful process. Go ahead, Cole.
I mean, I don't think we need to overthink this. I think we just need the administrators to come up with guidelines for each level of school and present it to us. I don't think the number of people has to be, I think you can have a range of people. I think looking for parity is good. I think the terms should be equal. I think that schools should have 2-year terms or whatever. And I think that should be consistent across the level, because I think that won't be, but I don't think we need to, I don't think every school needs to have an individual plan for how they're going to elect their people. I think that there is something that can be written and approved by us that is consistent enough that it can be used. 3 different things, the high school should be the same, middle school should be generally the same, the elementary should be generally the same, and we approve that. Like, I don't understand what the point of workshopping something like this would be. I think it's just, there are regulations, we need to have consistency. That's it. And then we approve that, and that's how we do it. And then if people aren't doing it that way, then that's when we have a discussion.
So Cove, I'm with you, but we're a committee. And so to the extent that there are, if the majority of this committee feels that they would like more, then certainly
we do need consistency. I'm still saying that we have a proposal that provides some bracket of consistency between the schools that will be followed.
So I think that would be my preferred approach. You folks tell me, was that also your preferred approach? I think it makes great sense. Go ahead, Rajiv.
I agree. I do think that's a good approach. And with Cove, in terms of simplicity, consistency at each level. What I'm not sure about right now is, do we not know what's in place at any of the schools, or are there schools struggling to figure out how they're going to elect school council members? Because if that's not the case, then in the fall, we have the opportunity to make sure the consistency is in place. If there are any blank spaces, if there are any schools that don't currently have a process for putting a school council in place, then that might be a little more urgent to tackle.
Aisha, Toby, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just reiterate what we said earlier, that there are school councils up and running, functioning with teacher and family and other representatives in every school. as you can see from the presentations here, there's not always parity because you don't always get enough volunteers to run for the offices, both on the teacher and student side. But other than that, I think we're up and running and folks are working well together. And that's, heard some examples of that tonight.
And are we comfortable, or do we know for sure that each of these school councils has bylaws in place in terms of elections and how those are running?
I haven't reviewed the bylaws. We could have that.
Also
present those, but they're up and
do they
running and have
exist?
some shared norms and agreements of how it works, I would say. So it's happening, whether or not they're parsing the rules as they go or just know what to do because they've always done it that way.
All right.
Okay, but my concern is it does have to meet the legal standards. And as we saw this evening, there are different memberships for a variety of reasons. As both Cove and I talked about, you were begging people to come on board. So again, I do think we just have to give them certainly a list. As you said, there are some people that have had elections, some that are in the middle of elections. When you have, again, new superintendent coming on board, entry planning, doing all of those things, this would be an area, I don't think it has to take a long time, but knowing that we want to make sure that every school has an approved process in place. School committee has approved it, goes in the books. You make sure that they're following the legal guidelines. And I agree, I don't think it has to be a long drawn out process. And again, it gives people direction as to what you'd approve.
And certainly not a standalone, if I could piggyback on what you're saying, not a standalone something, but we will be workshopping with our new superintendent. And so this seems like something we could just talk about.
What I wouldn't want happening is somebody bringing something to my attention as a superintendent that doesn't meet the legal standards, because where are you then? So if you've been, really, it sounds complicated. I really don't think it is. It's time that we're all getting back to things that we've done each year, have done very well, as you've seen here this evening. A lot of people doing great work. And I just think we just have to put the guidelines in place and approve them, because that is the role of the school committee. That is in your minutes. It's there. We can share that with the schools.
One more point, Rajiv.
Jill, since you're in the hot seat, having done some of this research, how easily could you put together a list of guidelines for elections?
Yep. So I think that probably the best going forward would be over the summer with Anna and the senior team and me sitting down saying, here's what you have to meet to follow the legal guidelines. What do you want to do in terms of how you want to meet them, right? Like, I don't think just listening what I'm hearing, we don't want to be prescriptive, or we don't need to be prescriptive, but we need to make sure we're meeting the basics. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. It wouldn't be me writing something that's like, check all these boxes, but it's more like these things do need to be followed by process, by numbers. How do you want to do it? Do you want to do it by level? Do you want to do it with like a general, here's your guidelines. If you have any questions, come back. I'm getting the sense that being overly prescriptive is not going to further the purpose of the school councils. However, you got to give it some legal validity, and it gives people guidance.
Right, and that's what I was thinking of, not writing out an election process, right, but here are the 5 things, and it would be a checklist. You would have to check the box on each of those, but that would make sure that we're following the letter of the law and hopefully the spirit of the law as well.
Yep. And I think some of that checklist would be legal, but some of it might be what the district wants to do in terms of terms and
Thanks, Rajiv. All righty, and thank you to Aisha, Toby, to Andrea, to Jackie, to Tammy, to Kay, to Jen, to Christine. Thank you very much for coming and for giving us a window in to your roles and your world on school council. We appreciate it very much. Good night, everybody. Okay, so our next and last topic is an advanced placement AP test analysis. For this, we're joined by Katie Hogue, Director of Data Analysis and Enrollment Planning. And Tammy might be staying as well. I'm not quite sure. Katie's drafted a very thorough memo for the committee, and she'll walk us through the analysis now and give us an opportunity to ask questions. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Looking at
Richie.
I'm looking at our agenda.
Yep.
And we seem to have not included the item we just considered, which puts us on track to finish up at 10:30 PM.
What do you mean we've not considered? I'm sorry.
Yeah, under discussion and updates, we had we seem to be behind like quite a bit, so just checking on that. 45.
I only have the 3 items. I'm not sure where you're looking.
Sorry, we have 60 minutes.
Longer to get.
Yes,
through our agenda.
we're over. It's
We're over,
fine.
right.
Is your point that from my perspective, Katie's here.
I do not
We
want to
can
bump
start-
Katie.
No. Katie's here.
Absolutely.
We can start this conversation. We can continue it in our next meeting. But I think she waited us out and she's ready to go. So we're not going to truncate the conversation if that's the worry.
That was kind of the worry. I want to make sure we have enough time to get into this conversation, and I appreciate Katie's patience. And I also acknowledge that if we're wrapping this up at 10:30, we may not, or
Won't go till 10:30.
if we rush to finish up,
Yep.
that may not give this topic the focus that it deserves. So, Coves.
And I agree with that. I mean, we have a 50-page slide deck here that that if that's how that's going to be presented, that's going to be very long. And I feel like we have set the precedent in recent meetings that when things start too late and we can't give them justice, that we move them. And I feel strongly about it because I feel like this is the most rich piece of this meeting. And I think 2 things. I think we're not going to be able to give it justice right now at this time. And I would apologize to anyone who was waiting to present. But I also think that it's possibly too much information for the presentation part of this. So I was going to make a motion to table it, but I defer to other people as well. But I just think, I want this to be a good discussion.
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
I second what Cove and Rajiv said. I feel like if we start diving into it now, and I apologize, Katie, I know you've been waiting for a while, and we're gonna probably ask you to do it. Hopefully we'll move it to earlier in the agenda if we do decide to table it for a future meeting. And the other thing is that we have only half the information in our packets, which we have only the even number pages.
So
by accident, I know, and I didn't even realize it until way after this meeting started.
Yeah.
And so for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable because I have notes about specific slides.
Yep.
But I can't reference them.
And I think what everyone is saying is perfectly reasonable. We don't need to motion. We can just agree for us to table this discussion with our apologies to Katie. However, I think we can take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that you wanted. If there was something that you were hoping to discuss, that might give Katie further direction that she would take to make the presentation more enriching and tailored to the things that you're wondering about. Everyone got the materials ahead of time. Plenty of data was shared. And so is there something there that you wish for Katie to focus on when she talks on the 22nd? Go ahead, Cove.
Well, 2 things. I think that I think that if I were preparing this presentation, I would focus on 2 to 3 tests. That must include the calculus test, which is where it seems to be some problematic information. I don't think we need to have the data on all the tests. I think I would pick some that are representative of where we feel we're at. Like if I were just off the top of my head, I think some of the English tests, one of the language tests and the calculus tests, and you look at the data from those tests. I think that what's missing for me here too is what else is going on around these tests. Like the question that I will ask is, with the calculus scores, what are we doing to intervene with these kids in the classroom? What supports are there? And I know that's probably not for Katie, but that's for the high school principals. Like I'd want to know, is there extra help time? Is there, what are we doing to support these students in that area? So those are the things for me. I just think this is too much information for people to absorb right now. And I should have, I will apologize for not weighing in on that sooner. I didn't have time to look at it until later today. So, that's just my thought. And I did think if we had more time for this discussion, we could kind of shape it around those, but.
Good. I think that's great feedback. Go ahead, Rajiv.
If I can just if I can just add to what Cove said, one of the things that I think is really important to understand is there seems to be a discrepancy between what this analysis shows and potentially what is reported on the DESE website. So I think it's important to make sure that the data for Newton and Newton Public Schools specifically, and the reason I make that distinction is because of the very helpful comment, I think, Katie, that you had included about how students who prepare individually are still counted as NPS when they take the AP tests at NPS, because we're a testing center. So just given that distinction, just understanding whether the data that DESE has is in line with the detailed analysis that Katie has done. Because some of the discussion and some of the concerns that parents have expressed is around what's been happening to our scores as compared to neighboring communities. And I don't think the analysis quite got to that, but I think it might be because of data discrepancies, but it would be helpful to have that very clearly discussed or laid out when we go through this.
Any other, go ahead, Kathy, and then Mayor Fuller.
So I liked Cove's suggestion of focusing on 3 more representative tests. And I was hoping that if we do something like that, we could disaggregate the 3 scores from the 4 and 5 scores. Because it is my understanding, although somewhat dated, that colleges view 3 scores somewhat differently than 4 and 5 scores. So to the extent for a very small subset of this, it would be possible to show that data separated, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Kathy. Mayor Fuller.
I was going to suggest disaggregating, not all of it, Katie, but selected. I would actually disaggregate by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, and by 5, if you can, to understand it. And anything you can do, again, you've got a full-time job and all your hours were already accounted for, but anything on peer schools or the United States as a whole, so we can put this in context. So I'm struggling a little bit what's unique to Newton and what's just going on across the country or across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Go ahead, Chris, and then on Ping.
So in the continuing spirit of disaggregation, I wouldn't mind seeing the 2 high schools separated. I know that's been a piece of analysis that's out there, and maybe that's partly what you're referring to, Rajiv, but just to be explicit about it. You know, the second thing that, just as I read through this and I looked at the data and the pros here, I had a tough time in part making the connection of clearly we have more kids taking these exams. That's a good thing. Clearly in, you know, and I would say leaning towards math and sciences and hard sciences anyway, you know, our test scores on average have gone down, and that's, you know, pointed to here as a somewhat explanatory factor. But then yet we talk about very explicitly the unnecessary requirements, the unnecessary prerequisites, and I'm just trying to square that of, you know, unnecessary by what standard? There, you know, there's a lot of sort of values put in here that I guess I would want to see more meat behind.
So to have somebody speak to those pieces specifically, which might be separate from the data itself.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead on Ping.
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, I like to thank Katie again and staying this late and then we'll do again. But also, to me, this is very rich data, and I've first time seen that. And as many people acknowledged, AP course is one of big topic here. We have heard a lot of parents talking about that. So this is very meaningful, by the way. So in that sense, probably it's good to do the justice. We need more time. And also I agree, we just talk about this data. And Katie probably will not answer many questions we are going to propose, which is a policy of taking the AP test and the two schools. I bet there are different procedures there, and that could the sources of some controversy here. Some parents complained about kind of things, so we probably need the principals and even department chairs. I'm wondering to be here when we ask those questions. And overall, I agree. This is 9:30, so getting late, and talking about this important topic, we need some time, and also the data very rich. We need time to look through, and hopefully, Katie, I know it's hard to ask Katie to do a little bit more analysis, and but that will make this more meaningful than what we have here, which is already great, by the way. First time seeing this, but disaggregate data will make things more meaningful. So again, I think we probably will, postpone to next time.
Thank you, Anping. So I'm not sure if it's more analysis, Katie, but what I'm hearing from the members is tailored or targeted analysis to some of the questions and the disaggregation that they've articulated that would be helpful for our understanding. And so again, to put another point on it, this is a rich array of information, and it's wonderful. And I think this exercise that we've just done is going to be helpful to having that really productive conversation next time, and giving you some guidance as to the questions that we're grappling with, so that we can focus on those. And I will confess to my fellow colleagues, I literally just lost track of the time, but thank you. You are absolutely correct. We didn't have enough time to really delve into this. And I think we'll when we meet back on the 22nd, we will absolutely have a wonderful opportunity to really delve in. Okay. So thank you, Katie. We apologize for this. We hope this was helpful to you. It was certainly helpful to hear what other folks are wondering about. So appreciate that. All right, so with that, we have concluded the posted business for tonight's meeting. Our next meeting will be a regular meeting on Monday, May 22nd. It will immediately follow our annual school choice public hearing. Tomorrow evening, the school department budget will be presented, and the FY 24 through 28 supplemental CIP capital improvement plan will be presented for discussion at the City Council at 7 p.m. Thank you to our central staff, and a big thanks to everyone who attended tonight. We appreciate it. Our meeting is now adjourned.
Recording